What's up, Cerebral Football fans? My name is Steven Hyder. This is Gate City Sports Channel. So I just wanted to come live for maybe an hour or so today and just talk a little bit about the Philadelphia Eagles pass rush, because some of the negativity that I see kind of floating around, I just genuinely disagree with. I still think there's some objective positivity to this group of guys we have in the building. And I do think that people are forgetting that while things did falter down the path last season, our pass rush was not what it has been in the past. I think people are kind of missing the forest for the trees and are kind of missing the point that your coverage and your pass rush work hand in hand. If either one of those things are out of sync, they're both out of sync. Doesn't matter. I mean, you could register all kinds of pressure numbers. You could register all kinds of quarterback hits. You can get all those things, right? But if those things are not leading to sacks and those things are not leading to turnovers and your coverage is busted on the back end, it doesn't matter. And I think to some extent, I think the pass rush is being blamed for things that were a much larger issue that wasn't necessarily just the pass rush in itself. And I want to start off by talking about what we had past the frontline players, okay? To my definition, what am I defining as the frontline players? In my opinion, your frontline players are Haason Reddick, they're Josh Sweat, they're Jalen Carter, right? They're Milton Williams, and then they're Jordan Davis, okay? Then you have that one veteran guy. We have that one veteran guy in Brandon Graham who looks like he's going to return. Nothing is permanently set yet. We don't know. And then you could consider a second veteran guy and a starter in a sense in Fletcher Cox. In my opinion, guys, I don't really care too much about the designation of who does or does not start. All that means is they take the first snap of a football game. It has nothing to do with the actual snap count throughout the game in the way that these things are necessarily managed, right? Situationally, who's there on third down and in those type of things, in those pass rush situations, if you will. Who's there to defend the run? Who are the guys they lean on? I just think that sometimes people go overboard with the starter nonsense. But I do want to talk about three names in particular, and then I want to open the discussion up wider. So we know last year the Eagles kind of made a somewhat surprising move, because I didn't think that this young man was the type of player that I would normally think would be signed here, which was former Penn State product Brandon Smith, which they signed in season. Talented young man, never really kind of caught on, still pretty young, still has an opportunity to be pretty dang good in the league. I think he's only like 22, 23 years old. Like, he's a very young prospect. And then we found out that the Philadelphia Eagles went after a former first-round pick in Julian Okwara and actually brought him in on one of the largest future deals. I think it's the largest future deals so far the 2024 NFL offseason. So I wanted to go back and I wanted to take a look at these two guys and just get a feel for what are they? Like, physically as athletes, what are these two players? Okay. Let's start with Julian Okwara. Coming out of that draft, I think he was around 18, 19-ish, guys, somewhere in that area. He's 6'4", 252 pounds coming out at the combine. That's what he measured in officially there, right? 34.38-inch arm reach. Just to explain a little bit about arm reach, guys, and where that matters in terms of judging your offense and defensive linemen. When you're in the trenches, anything above 33 inches, and in particular, 33 and a half is the line of demarcation for offensive linemen a lot of times. Anything above like 33 inches is going to be what we would consider to be the standard, if you will, for arm reach. So when you're getting to 34 and above a quarter inch in your arm reach, you're talking about a guy that's got some range to him, right? This is a lengthy football player, if you will. 81.75-inch wingspan. When I first heard about this signing, this is one of those ones that you kind of immediately identify as like, okay, this is clearly going to be that edge type of player. This is a guy that could absolutely play the overhang on-ball Sam linebacker spot, right? The things we're used to seeing with, kind of like Haason Reddick and Nolan Smith type roles. He can absolutely play that, but I don't think there's anything, just given the nature of the frame here, I don't think there's anything to say that he could not also play as a backup type player on the opposite side with Josh Sweat, where it's a little bit more traditional. That guy will sometimes be down, in kind of that 3-point stance, if you will. He's going to be hands in the dirt at times, if you will. Now, Okwara was given some flack coming out of college, guys, where they said that he was a little light in the butt, little too short, pause. But you get what I'm saying, guys. They said he was a little light, but then he went on and threw up 27 reps on the bench press. So he might be a little light, but he's strong. He's definitely strong. Now let's talk about the second guy. This is the first player coming into last season that they signed, which is Brandon Smith. The last time we discussed Brandon Smith, we really talked about him more playing as an off-ball backer. And then my guy Unspoken was like, Gate, what do you think about him playing on-ball? Do you think that's what they brought him in for? I kind of went back and reviewed it a little bit, and I'm like, you know what? They might have. I mean, it makes sense. Like, he's got the ability to play either. And I do think that while we have a huge need at off ball, I think if you're just judging where Brandon Smith will probably be a better fit in the NFL, I do think as a specialized edge player, probably is the better fit for a Brandon Smith. He's 6'3", 250 pounds is what he weighed in at the combine, guys. Mind you, the height, the weights, the height's going to stay somewhat permanent, guys. I mean, you're not going to move too much in height after you're 20-some years old. But the weight can absolutely fluctuate in the NFL, guys. But 6'3", 250, 34.63-inch arm reach, above 34.5-inch arm reach. The first thing is standing out to me from Julian Okwara and Brandon Smith in the thought process of these guys being edge players, that arm reach, that length, guys. 81.75-inch wingspan for Julian Okwara, 81.5-inch wingspan for Brandon Smith. You're getting these guys who are much more rangy in terms of the body frame, what they're built as, right? You're getting guys that are going to probably be better at setting that edge and engaging in the run game and helping shut that stuff down. That's the first thing that stands out to me about these two players. The athletic profile, what I will say is we don't know much about Julian Okwara because, unfortunately for Julian Okwara, he missed the combine that year because he ended up injuring. He broke his fibula. And then after he broke his fibula, this happened in like early November of that year. He wasn't able to participate yet necessarily in the running drills at the combine. And then his pro day at Notre Dame got canceled. So the only information we have from him is going to come from an actual like personal pro day that he did, a personal like workout that he put out there. And he put up a 4.640. However, he went back and said that when fully healthy, he's a 4.53-ish kind of guy. That's what he ran the spring before. He ran a 4.5340. The problem is I don't care about full 40 times, guys. They're overblown as crap. You have to know the splits. The full 40 time is not as important as people think. You have to know those splits. And I don't know the splits there. But I will say that he made Bruce Feldman's freak list going into that season. So this guy is athletic. We do know that Julian Okwara was thought of being a very athletic player. Fitz Fangio, by the way. Brandon Smith, what can we say about his numbers, guys? A 4.52 40 with a 1.58 split and a 2.62 20 split, and he had a 37.5-inch vertical. He's pretty athletically gifted, guys. I mean, I'll say the 1.58 split is not quite as impressive as that 2.62 20 split. It's a pretty good 20 split, honestly. He's kind of keeping up there with some of the more athletically gifted guys in the league. The 1.58 split is still a really good time, but it's not like that 1.55 or below to where you're going, oh, wow, this dude really gets off. But these are all sub 1.6s, which tells me twitchy. And that's what you're going to see is that Fangio kind of likes these twitchy players. And to make this point, guys, just go back to what we know about Fangio historically, like what he did with Denver. Who were his players on the edges for Denver, right? You had that twitchy guy in Von Miller. Von Miller is kind of the prototype, right? I know there are guys that existed before Von Miller, but Von Miller is the guy we normally look to when we talk about the Micah Parsons, when we talk, obviously Lawrence Taylor guys, but in the modern NFL concept of it. The Von Millers who we look at when we talk about the Micah Parsons, when we talk about the Haason Reddicks, right? When we talk about these type of players, one of the first names that always normally comes to people's mind is Von Miller because Von Miller was a really athletically gifted, twitchy player. Von came in at like 6'3", 246 when he was at the combine, guys, 33.5-inch arm reach. That line of demarcation, by the way. Longer, rangier player, even though he's a little light in the frame, right? We don't know his wingspan. I can't find substantial information to feel comfortable in saying that, guys. He did put up 21 reps on the bench press, so he was over 20 reps in the bench press. I would say that's adequate strength for the NFL. I mean, you're doing 225 at over 20 reps, you're pretty strong, to be quite honest, in the set. 4.42 40, okay? A 1.57 10 split and a 2.57 20 split. He's twitchy. 37-inch vertical, 126-inch broad jump, a 6.7 3-cone, and a 4.06 short shuttle. This dude has the hips of a freaking defensive back playing on the edge, right? So Von Miller is kind of that twitchy guy, the Haason Reddick, the Nolan Smith type. And then they had Bradley Chubb in Denver, who's a little bit more of the Haason Reddick type. To be fair, Haason Reddick is a tremendous athlete, but he's also a little bit more closer to the prototype of an NFL player, you know what I mean, in terms of an edge player. 6'4", 269 for Chubb, 34-inch arm reach, 79-inch wingspan, 24 reps on the bench press, 4.65 40, a 1.62 10 split. So he was a little above that 1.6 line of demarcation for that. But I mean, I would still say Chubb is, he's still somewhat of a twitchy guy. 2.72 20 split, 36-inch broad vertical jump, 121-inch broad jump. So 10 foot, like 1 inch broad jump. A 7.3 cone and a 4.41 short shuttle, not as smooth in the hips, if you will. A little bit more of the traditional guy. When I was looking at free agents, I wanted to know where the Eagles had interest and then kind of get a feel for what in the world was going on in Miami last year when the players they had. So theoretically, when you looked at Miami's roster, right, these dudes looked like, to me, like, okay, you got to feel for, like, there could be some true talent in Miami, especially underneath Vic Fangio. I was like, man, that defense might be pretty good underneath Vic, because they had Jalen Phillips and he had Bradley Chubb. Okay, that's tremendous. But they didn't stop there, guys. When I was looking through their roster, they also had Justin. They had a lot of veteran dudes that are kind of twitchy. Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, Bruce Irvin. Bruce Irvin definitely qualifies as more of that twitchy guy, right? Melvin Ingram, a little shorter in the arms, but still kind of twitchy, if you will. Justin Houston, Jalen Phillips, a little bit more towards the Bradley Chubb type role, a little bit stronger, stronger guys that are a little bit more of edge setters, if you will. They went deep in their rotation. That doesn't even include the guy that we really need to talk about today, is the guy that we have interest in, which is Andrew Van Ginkel, who was an outside linebacker for them, right? This is another one of these twitchy, Von Miller types. He's not the athletic, kind of specimen that you're going to see from Haason Reddick. He's not the athletic specimen you're going to see from what Von Miller was. He's not the athletic specimen of I would even go and say like Bruce Irvin. Bruce Irvin was a heck of an athlete when he was coming out of college, right? He's certainly nowhere near Nolan Smith level of athleticism. But what he is 6'3", 241 pounds, 32 and a half inches in the arm reach, a little shorter in the limbs, but this is not like a true worrisome area yet. 77.375 inches in the wingspan. This is not the prototype, no doubt about that. 4.59 40, so sub 4.6 40. A 1.6210 split, so kind of like we talked about with Bradley Chubb, a little above that line of demarcation, that 1.6 or below, but not drastically over it. But then look at this 20 split, guys. A 2.52 20 split. That's better than Brandon Smith's, and that's 1/10 of a second, not even a tenth, less than a tenth of a second. Slower. Nolan put up a 2.51. This kid put up a 2.52 20 split. So even though he put up a 4.59 40 with a 1.62 20 or with a 1.62 10 split, the 20 split shows you there is some athleticism with this guy. It may not be as sudden, but there's athleticism behind this player. There's no doubt about it. A 38-inch vertical. That's Haason Reddick territory, man. Haason had that, was it like a 39-inch vertical? A 6.893 cone and a 4.14 20-yard shuttle. Those are numbers you expect out of defensive backs and receivers, guys. This young man has got very fluid hips is what I would judge these numbers. When I looked at film, I would expect to see a guy that's very fluid in the hips. Maybe doesn't have the initial burst of like a Bruce Irvin, a Von Miller, a Haason Reddick, a Michael Parsons. He probably doesn't have that level of initial burst. Still don't doubt the athlete. This guy's still athletically gifted. This is a dude that I would look at and think to myself, like, if you develop the pass rush, the use of the hands, the subtle manipulations of how you shoot your hips correctly, if you got this young man into, a program, he could be a really, really good situational pass rusher. And he turned out to be a pretty dang good player for Miami last year named Vic Fangio. So when I look at free agents, we've already made the move for Julian Akwara, right? Brandon Smith is already on this roster. So these are darts at the board, guys, right? These are throwing darts at the board, athletic profile guys. We'll see if Vic Fangio can work some magic with these dudes, right? The underlying athleticism is there, right? We know we got top-end guys. We know we got a guy we drafted we're going to develop. We know we got a veteran dude, okay, here in Brandon Graham. And we know we got these darts at the board guys like Julian Akwara and Brandon Smith. I do think that a guy like Andrew Van Ginkel, if you brought him in as a free agent, I don't think the cupboards are bare here in Philadelphia for the pass rush guys. I really don't. And I think people are forgetting just how athletically gifted this team could be. If this team could get creative in its pass rush, if this team could be just a little bit more creative in its pass rush, you could definitely have a problem for defenses to try to figure out what's going on. And I'm talking about from run defense to clear, pass rush situations on 3rd and long to just simply the movement and the motion of players coming in and out, not knowing where things are coming from, where you're trying to show them that you're overloading one side, but you're not. I think if you did things like you got Haason Reddick on one side, you got Josh Sweat on the other side, right? You got Jalen Carter and Milton Williams. And then you take a dude like, Brandon Graham, and this is not me just making crap up out of thin air, guys. We did this a handful of plays last year. And you put Brandon Graham down on a zero technique to take advantage of a smaller center who is probably equally as explosive as Brandon Graham, but Brandon Graham's got that old man strength that might be able to work that dude inside. And then you stand up a guy coming up out of the A or B gap, probably a B gap if you got Brandon over the zero tech. You stand a guy up, right? You take a guy like, a Brandon Smith, a Julian Akwara type, right? Nolan Smith in particular is what I'm talking about. And I really am disappointed they never used Kyron Johnson. They never gave Kyron Johnson an opportunity with all that athleticism. If you take these type of guys that have these incredible amounts of athleticism, you already got this athleticism on the edges in Haason, and you got the athleticism out there in Josh Sweat. You got the crazy interior pass rush that you can get from a Jalen Carter, the crazy interior pass rush that you can get from, a guy like, Milton Williams. Then you got, Jordan Davis if you're just trying to control the interior, or you got, a guy like Brandon Graham if you're trying to legitimately push the interior, you're trying to beat the guy off the snap. Then you add to this a guy like a Nolan Smith where you don't know if this guy's coming in any given down. This could be for run support, to get more into the box. This could just simply be to make you have to go through your reads and show us as a defense where your hot route's going. So that way we can make you think we're overloading one side, make you think that's where you want the ball to go, and then we're dropping out. Think early on how Jalen got picked off a couple of times like that, to where they brought down those defenders, right? Almost like that Mike Zimmer look, and then they dropped them post-snap. They made it look like they were bringing 6 or 7 guys, but post-snap, they actually dropped 8 and only rushed like 3. If we can do those type of things in Philadelphia, if we can get creative, it could get pretty dang good here, guys. We've got, the cupboards are not as bare as people think. The imagination, the creativity was bare, right? And I do think there were times that we saw some elements of it. I'm not trying to just trash the coaching staff completely last year. I thought there were elements and there were times where we saw that type of creativity come out, but it just wasn't consistent enough, right? It wasn't enough to really fool the quarterback and to utilize some of the freaking athletic ability we have out there. Even, I didn't even give Jordan Davis his flowers, but you're talking about a guy that was 330 pounds, guys, who's, that guy had, what was Jordan Davis's 10 split? Like a 1.63. I'm trying to remember. Like, Jordan Davis had this crazy 10 split when you looked at his 40 time coming off that combine. And he's a guy that, like, when you look at the athleticism on the roster here in Philadelphia, that's the part that bothers me more than everything, guys, is the fact that I don't always think that we were taking advantage of the inherent abilities, the inherent advantages we had in terms of pure athleticism down in the trenches, because we got some dudes that can really play. So this man put up a 4.78 40 with a 1.63 10 split at 341 pounds at the combine. I don't know what his real weight is, guys. I'm not going to get into that, but you get my point that I'm saying here, guys. A lack of creativity. Just get creativity going. We got to be creative with the bodies we have in camp here, the bodies we have on the roster. We have dudes that can get the job done, and I think there needs to be a little bit more creative pressure. We relied a little bit more on, like, we got guys that can beat you one-on-one. We just want to make you commit to the blocking scheme, and then we're going to trust our edge guys to beat you. We're going to trust our interior guys to beat you. That worked really well, in 2022, to be fair, with Javon Hargrave and, with Fletcher Cox and with, Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat. Like, those guys, Brandon Graham, we had like 3 guys with double-digit sacks. But yeah, we saw that teams kind of adapted to us, man. They adapted their protection scheme to us. I think we got to dial it up a little bit. I think we got to be a little bit more creative with where we're bringing pressure. I think we got to be creative in how we use players, not be so freaking obvious with it all. All right, guys, let's get to some comments. 4133 the podcast. Hey, how you been, brother? I've been good, man. How about you, buddy? Oh, Pop, what's up, man? He says, what do you think about the Nick report? I don't know why Eagles brought him back, bro. Don't do crap and cause issues. I wouldn't read too much into that stuff, oh, Pop. There's no way that your head of security is playing that. Like, that just sounds like nonsense to me. I'm just telling you from my coaching experience, that sounds like complete and utter nonsense. I wouldn't put too much into that report. I think the biggest thing with Nick is to have trust with his assistants. We all talked about the relationship that Brian Johnson had with Jalen Hurts, which was a really strong relationship. But we never really talked about the fact that perhaps Brian Johnson and Nick Sirianni's relationship wasn't quite as strong, and that could be problematic in terms of the install of the offense. I think that's the larger issue at hand, is that we've got to come to a way of getting more creative and get more ideas into the building. And that comes with Nick trusting his assistant coaches and his offensive coordinators and his passing game coordinators, his run game coordinators, right? To get those guys to come in with fresher ideas to see what defenses did to us and how you attack that this year. Like, to me, that's the bigger thing. These other things, man, these are nonsense reports. What's up, Dante? How you doing, man? What's up, China? How are you? Yes to creativity. I'm tired of teams making it look so easy to beat us. Yeah, especially the fact that, like, we'll run 1,000 screens, like tunnel screens and wide receiver bubble screens and stuff, and we can't even get a yard, but we watch other teams get 7 to 8 yards at will against us. Like, that was really frustrating last year. What's going on, Gate? How you been, bro? Hanging in there, Stu. How about you, buddy? What's for supper? I don't know yet, Jay. I gotta still figure that out, man. It's still it's pretty early over here, man. It's only like 10:40. Are they going to move on from Sweat, Cox, Bradbury, Maddox, Byard, and Kelsey? Roji, I mean, we won't really know the answer to that. I don't know that they're going to move on from Sweat right yet. I mean, if you're talking within the next 2 to 3 years, Roji, you might have a completely different defense, sure. If you're talking about this year, like Fletch, I think Bradbury's up for play. I do think Maddox is up for play. Byard, I think there's probably some reason to suspect that the better play is to restructure the contract and keep a veteran body in the building and then draft another young guy with Sidney Brown and blank to kind of come up. Because, Byard's not a permanent answer to this, this problem. But I do think that Byard was better than he showed last year. I think some of that had a lot to do with just the dysfunction in the building. I think he's a better player than what he showed us last year. How are they going to move on from Kelsey if he's not under contract and debating retirement? Trying to say consistency is the key. I agree. Derek Gunn has a history with false reporting. Yeah, Derek Gunn's is kind of tough, China, because I will say that at least Derek Gunn does have legitimate sources within the building. But I do think there are times, like China, to your point, there are times that you receive a report and you probably should validate it more. You should probably dig into that a little bit more to make sure that there's some more validation to what's being said. And then also ask, I think Derek should have stepped back from the situation for a second and really thought to himself, like, some of these things you're reporting, like, was that really truly the internal strife going on? Or are these just side effects? Because to me, that's the thing is like, that's a trope we see every single year that a quarterback gets paid in Philadelphia. He's distracted by the contract. I'm old enough, but also I was so young back then that I didn't fully grasp it, but I remember the noise around when Randall got his first deal, China. I remember when Randall got his first deal and those same, those same tropes were being used there that, oh, he's too focused on the money and the commercials. And to be fair, Randall did come out later on and said that he should have studied film more, but I don't think it's because he got paid. I just think some play like Mike Vick admitted until he got in here with Andy Reid, Mike Vick was never really a film guy. Andy made him into a film guy. So like when I hear people say this, China, just as someone who coached myself, like what I'm seeing is not a player issue. I'm seeing a coaching issue. Like, and I don't think that was the issue with Jalen at all. I mean, the guy's a hard worker. We know that he values this. We know he wants to win more than anything. I don't think that was the issue with him. I genuinely think that defenses gave him looks that he hadn't seen before. And I think as the season went on, I think the spirit of the team got killed a little bit. I think the dysfunction in there with the coaching staff and stuff like that. Like if you guys remember that play that Nick Sirianni flipped out on, there's a play where Nick Sirianni flipped out, and it was because he was getting frustrated with the lack of time management from the coaching staff. And he made a mistake, to be fair. Nick made a mistake, and the coach called the player over, but Nick lost his stuff because he felt like this was a coach trying to sub a player this late into the clock. And that's where, Devontae was like, yo, coach called him, like trying to, smooth the situation over. So like in a sense, I get Nick's frustration in that moment. I don't think that's the right opportunity to do those things. I do think that people need to have discussions with Nick internally to say like, Nick, passion is a thing. I wouldn't trade that passion, guys. I don't like these suit and tie, prim and proper coaches. It's just not reality. It's not reality. I mean, like, come on. Some of y'all that played, what were some of the things said to you guys when you played? I know what was said to me when I played. Like, coaches said some crazy stuff when I was playing. I don't see that happening at the professional level. I just see frustration that spills out sometimes. And I think in that particular situation that everyone keeps referencing, it was Nick was getting frustrated with the lack of actual time management from the staff. And we kept getting a lot of these procedural calls. And I think he just lost it in that game and was really mad when he thought there was a player being subbed out that late in the clock. I think he lost it, and it turned out to be that he made a wrong assumption in that particular situation. But it probably tells us that internally there was some stuff going on. Behind the scenes from the coaching perspective, I do think that the way that things were being managed in game, I think Nick may have had some problem with some of these guys. Clearly. I mean, he was ready to go at it with that linebacker coach. So, it's tough. It's so tough to do these things, man. And it's really hard to trust, like China, like you're saying, it's really tough to trust the reporting right now because, they are in the market to gather views. They do work for an organization. That organization doesn't need clicks in order to function. And I think we do need to be a little skeptical of any report that comes out. there's probably some element of truth to what they say, but we also got to be probably well aware of the exaggerations that they're going to with some of this stuff. What's up, Justin? How you doing, man? How are you? What do you think about Surtain, Humphreys, Queen trade signings? I think Surtain, if you got an honest, if there was a real chance at getting Patrick Surtain, I would definitely probably take that opportunity. I think Patrick Surtain he's an elite level cornerback. I do think Vic Fangio's scheme, man, he can find ways of getting pass rush. That guy's really good at creating a pass rush. But I do think that you cannot compromise the back seven in Fangio's scheme. I think he needs to have really strong safety play, and I think he needs to have at least one lockdown, dependable corner. So I do see some merit to trying to get a Surtain. I will say I think the young man from the Bears is potentially going to be a free agent. They got a really high caliber player out there. He's another guy that likes to mix it up. I think he would be a natural boundary side corner. He's a guy I would look into if he actually makes it through and is an actual free agent. That's a guy I think the Eagles should add. Jalen Johnson, so I'm referring to, guys. They should have interest in Jalen Johnson, if I'm being honest. I like the young man from Kansas City, too. I know that he was not a high draft pick, and sometimes people get turned off to that, but, the young man's talented. He's been linked to the Eagles, saying that there's interest there. I do think that L'Jarius Sneed would bring something to the Eagles. I think he's another guy that's got a little moxie. He's got a little fight to him, Eagles realist. I think that he can mix it up. I think we need a little bit of attitude on the defense, especially when it comes to coming up and playing the run. I got tired of these dudes ducking their shoulders down, man, looking down at that ground and ducking the shoulder. I mean, there's a lot of that in the secondary. We had a couple guys that were not scared to hit. The one thing I will give some credit to is that Sidney Brown is really flawed in terms of the technique of tackling, but that young man is not scared. Reed Blankenship will come up and stick you. There's no doubt about that. And I thought Kaylee Ringo, when Kaylee Ringo got involved in the games, I thought Kaylee Ringo gave effort playing what we call the short boundary, called the short area of the field. When he came up and actually played those tunnel screens and stuff like that, I actually thought that Kaylee Ringo brought some attitude. We need more of that. I don't see enough of it. I'm excited to see Isaiah Rodgers and how they use him, right? I've talked about him before. I told you guys that he's traditionally played as more of the field corner and, kind of the backup guy. He was the main outside backup guy in Indianapolis, and he played a lot of field corner, which is like, think Darius Slay. It's where you're playing. There's an athletic profile to that. Most of the guys that play the field do have the underlying athletic ability to then carry inside as a nickel. So you could look at him, even though he doesn't have the experience, of saying he's got the makeup of it. It's more so, can he work through traffic? It's the intellectual stuff of working through the traffic and the skill set of that. So, I mean, like, I do think we got a couple of guys in-house. We got to figure out the contracts, what they're going to do with Slade, what they're going to do with, Bradbury. Those contracts are kind of complex, but they're not to where they can't get out of. There are avenues to get out of those contracts, guys. So, I mean, we got to look at that area and see what they do first, because that's got to happen first, right? They got to figure some stuff out there. Justin said, go get Patrick Queen. Yeah, just to have a solid, dependable off-ball linebacker, cornerback in the draft, and build from that. China said, I love Nick's passion and how he's a player's coach, but you're right. There's a time and a place, especially when the spirit is dying in the locker room. Exactly, China. I wouldn't have done that on the field if I was Nick. That would have been behind closed doors where I'm not embarrassing the coach in front of his players, but I would have definitely chewed that dude's tail out. I would have been on their butts for a long time about the clock management. And ultimately that's on Nick, because Nick's the head coach and he's the executive coach at that. So he's, you know what I mean? Like, maybe reevaluate how you're managing these situations and who you're giving control to in terms of those situations, because we had some issues with that stuff, man. We had a lot of pre-snap penalties. Showing off, what's good, man? How you been, bro? We're going to have a good amount of cap if Howie does what he's supposed to. It's going to be an interesting offseason. Yeah. China said Reed, Sidney, and Sneed. Whew, yes, please. Yeah, those dudes they'll come up and play the run. Those three in particular will play the run. They're physical. All three of those guys are very fit. I like L'Jarius Sneed. I liked him, the year we played Kansas City in the Super Bowl 22. I was watching some tape of him in the lead up to the Super Bowl, and I was like, that dude's, I don't know that he's the most athletically gifted guy out there in the world, but he's a fighter. He fights, man. I mean, there's something respectable about guys like that. When you got a guy out there that is just leaving it all on the field, there's nothing you can do but respect it. You know that he's not leaving anything on the table. He's putting it all out there. What's up, Cal Bundy? He said we definitely need attitude. Slay letting people disrespect JB, even though JB got cooked. Yeah, I agree with you. You got to take up for your guy, man. Yeah, I felt the whole team probably should have been, and some guys did speak up. AJ wasn't having that. AJ went back at them for going at JB like that. But I do agree the whole team should have probably been a little bit more vocal to have JB's back on some of this. Like, yeah, I agree with the assertion there. Yeah. Sidney been the only one wanting to tackle. Yeah. This Nakobe's last chance. Nolan snap count got to increase drastically. I can't wait for Rodgers. Yeah, Isaiah Rodgers is the player I'm really interested to see what they do there, how they utilize that young man. He's a really good special teams player too, Justin. That young man is a good punt returner and kick returner. Now, I don't know if he's going to take the role of punt returner just because, like, I honestly think that I think the young Mormon did a pretty good job back there, to be quite honest. I think he's been, I think he's been on the upcome. I thought at the end of the 22 season, we saw him kind of tick up a little bit, Britton Covey. But, yeah, I mean, he's a good player, man. He's a really good player. Justin, I'm excited to see how he works his magic. Sounds like Rodgers has a similar profile to Maddox as a boundary cornerback moved to nickel. I don't think Maddox played nickel at Pitt. He didn't. One above all. Good read. I don't remember if he played boundary or field at Pitt. I have to go back and look at it one above all. I don't have it like on the top of my head right now, but yes, athletic profile is exactly the same, right? Twitchy, fast, stronger for their size. Definitely stronger for his size than people give Avonte Maddox credit for, but that play style has led him to receive a lot of injuries, to be fair. I think that's a pretty dang good read. And I think you're 1,000% correct that he played outside at Pitt, and then the underlying movement skills were there. The underlying athleticism was there for the Eagles to say this dude would make a heck of a nickel corner in the league. And they were right. I mean, to give the Eagles credit, they got that one right. If Avonte had stayed healthy, I don't think we'd be having these conversations. It was really the letdown in his health. I can't wait. With what we have, at least 50 plus to play with, it's going to get spicy. That's a pricey. If you want a cornerback that will play the run, we need Max Melton in the draft. He is the guy I will be banging the table for. I haven't had a chance to really look through his film like that yet, one above all, but I think someone told me to look him up during the last live stream, so I think I do have him written down. Yeah, Justin said very good on special teams. Nah, Covey's got it locked down for now. Laugh out loud. Yeah, but I mean, he could make a kick returner. We've been using Boston Scott in that role, but Isaiah Rodgers would make a really good kick returner. I would never forget him for not defending JB and allowing the Niners to come in our house and beat us like we're Stool or something. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think that game kind of broke the team spirit a little bit. I agree. Maddox can pack his bags today. I'm sure he already has. Yeah, I'm curious what they're going to do there, Justin. I'm not too sure what they're going to do with Avonte. That's an interesting one. But I do think that if they view Isaiah Rodgers in that, in that kind of like viewpoint, if they had that viewpoint that this is a guy who's primarily played outside, who has all the underlying traits of a nickel cornerback, and is, just a guy that can really be phenomenal with these twitchy, fast guys and covering them. Yeah, they might. There's a chance that definitely happens. Shonoff said, I think Nakobe will play better with a nose tackle in front of him. There still needs to be competition in camp, though. Yeah, Shonoff, I want to see what they do in terms of Nakobe was really good against the run, Shonoff. That run defense fell apart when he left. I still think that the young man we signed from the Texans that came in late in camp, he had big arm reach too. He was another guy that had that ability to stack and shed linebackers. Can't think of his name right now, guys. But I definitely think that once Nakobe went down, we saw that instinctiveness, that ability to really beat a guy and get through there and shut down the run. We saw that kind of disappear a little bit. With that said, I felt like Nakobe and the scheme and the way they were having him drop in zone, they had this really passive zone to where Nakobe was getting blamed for like these really easy completions. And it's like, it's not his fault, man. It's the scheme. The scheme is just too easy to defeat. That zone is really soft on the underneath. I'm curious if Fangio doesn't mix that up a little bit more. If of course they're going to play some soft zone underneath, but if they don't get to the point to where when teams are obviously just taking advantage of it, if Fangio doesn't quickly make that adjustment and start to tighten up that zone, that area. Because if you're just spot dropping, you're under 3. So, if you're just spot dropping the under 3. So, if you think about the differences between quarters and cover, like cover 3 guys, right? Cover 3, you're 3 deep, 4 under, right? When you're quarters, you're 4 deep, 3 under. So if you're spot dropping those 3 under guys, it's just easy to defeat that underneath stuff. So I wonder if they're going to mix that up a little bit, Shona, in terms of the coverage. That's what he really got cooked for. That's why people were mad. I totally agree. I was discussed with how they disrespected Bradbury. Nobody came to his aid, regardless of his play being off. He's an Eagle at the end of the. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you got to have your guys back. Yeah. Nakobe got to beef up in a major way. I was watching the tape on our lineman Darius Kennard's highlight from Kentucky. The young man we signed from Kansas City, the offensive tackle. That man was tearing Nakobe up. I was looking like, is that Nakobe? Shaking my head. Avante can pack his bags today. Yeah, I feel you about the A.J. Brown buddy comments about Devo. Do you think he handled that correctly? I thought he was trying to be like, I think he was trying to sugarcoat it a little too much, Eagles realist. I think he was like, he didn't want people to confuse him sticking up for his guys being animosity, when most of us realize that at the end of the day, a lot of these dudes behind the scenes are they're friends, not fans, but they're friends of each other. So, I mean, like, I don't think, I think you can have that animosity on the field, but off the field, you know what I mean? I don't think you need to go through that explanation as a player. I think the vast majority of us get it, that, you guys play the same position. You're both very physical receivers. You probably worked in a lot of the similar camps and the off-season program stuff. We get that you probably know each other, but, when a dude's trashing your guy, man, you gotta go at it, man. Shonuff said, to be fair, Niners picked on the most reserved, quiet player on the Eagles. Why didn't anybody try Fletcher Carter? Yeah. Well, apparently they did try Carter. Now they're crying about it. Shonuff. Now they're crying about Carter's clapback to the guy. Easy. What's good, buddy? He says, hey, Gate, any names in the draft that caught your eye for the Eagles? I'm still kind of making my list of Easy. I think we definitely have a need in terms of the secondary. I think the back seven's got to get better. I don't predict that they're going to probably take a linebacker in the first round. I mean, I would love that to happen, but, just the history of the Eagles' recent history, I'm a little hesitant there. But I do think that the later second round into the third round, I do think is in play for a linebacker. So I'm kind of looking at guys that would have that evaluation there, just to get a feel for if there's anyone in that evaluation range that I would really like to see play. I do think that they need corners. They need young corners. I mean, I think you just keep throwing darts at the board at the cornerback position. I would keep throwing those darts at that board until you get, because, Bradbury and Slay's not going to last forever, ever. You clearly structured the contracts to where if you wanted to get out of one of those deals this year, you can, but you got to structure where you can get out of both deals next year. So Howie clearly had an idea of how long it was going to last. I think you got to do something there. I think that you still need a player on the outside that can lock guys up for the next 10 years. It could be that lockdown cornerback. I don't think we got that solution in-house yet. I think we got a lot of prospects we like, right? We got a lot of young guys that we like. We got guys that I probably would feel more comfortable as the main backup outside cornerback. I don't know if we have permanent answers yet. We'll see. I'm curious at how they feel about, we were talking earlier, Easy. Isaiah Rodgers is kind of a wild card. I don't know how they feel about him. He was one of the main backups in Indianapolis. He has all the movement abilities of a nickel corner. He just doesn't have the experience playing the position. But as someone brought up earlier in the conversation, neither did Avonte Maddox, by the way. Avonte Maddox was an outside cornerback at Pittsburgh, and the Eagles saw the underlying athleticism and his movement skills and said, that guy, if he learns how to play through traffic, would make a really good nickel cornerback. So, I mean, I think that was a really good point. So, I mean, we'll have to see what they think of as Isaiah Rodgers and what the plan is. Field corner, nickel corner, they're going to play him on the boundary. I mean, he's kind of shorter in terms of the height, stature, and the arm reach. But, I mean, sometimes, if you're scrappy, you can get away with not having those physical, markers, if you will. So, I mean, we'll have to see. AJ's young. He's going to learn. Yeah, I agree with you, Justin. Those people that were calling for us to trade AJ, I don't know where they're coming from, man. Like, I'm not trying to trade away a guy that I think is just a bona fide threat on the football field. Like, that dude's, we may disagree with the way he handled some things, but I'm not going to sit here and act like that dude's not an incredible football player. I missed the vibe and attitude CJ brought. You think we bring him back? I don't know. It's hard to say like what the interest is. Vic Fangio is going to probably have some say in the personnel. I will say that in terms of the edge rushers, when I was looking over Miami's roster, they brought in a lot of veteran guys down the stretch to help them out. They had, Justin Houston and Melvin Ingram and Bruce Irvin. You know what I mean? That was with their frontline guys being Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb. And Van Ginkel was involved in that as in, kind of that on-ball kind of Sam linebacker role too. So, you know what I mean? Like, they definitely kind of stacked that area in Vic's defense, and he was not shy. So, I mean, I don't know if he looks at our secondary and says to himself, the back seven needs veterans. There's a lot of youth on this team, but there's not a lot of, outside of the two main guys, you know what I mean? There's not a lot of veteran leadership there. I don't know, I mean, they got Byard in the safety room. I don't know if they're going to bring him back yet, but I mean, he's clearly a veteran guy. They got Slay, they got Bradbury. Those three guys are veterans, but Blank was his first year being the true starter on the football team. Avante's kind of in the middle somewhere, right? He's not inexperienced, but he's not like, I wouldn't call him like a wily vet either. But I mean, he's a guy when healthy, he could be dependent upon. He's just not healthy. He's always injured. And then you look at those guys, you got Kaylee Ringo, you got all these guys back on the back end of that roster that are all young guys. You know what I mean? Those are all guys that were trying to develop. I think some of those guys showed us a little bit of ability last year, but it's possible, OPOP, that he says, you know what, we need some veteran presence on the back end, the same way we addressed this in terms of the pass rush in Miami. We're going to use that in terms of the secondary in Philly side. We'll have to see the direction he takes. Milton and Davis both have a 6% pass win rate, while Carter has 17%, while being doubled the most. I could see another pass rushing defensive tackle being targeted in free agency or the draft to partner with Carter. I think, yeah, I mean, they got to be careful a little bit easy about the money there. Because, obviously pass rushers are going to cost you money, no doubt about it, especially interior. We saw what Javon got paid, but I think you're talking about trying to identify the next Javon or slightly lesser than Javon, I think Milton has some ability, though. I think it was just a down year. I trust that Milton. I've seen enough of Milton to know that young man can get a pass rush home. He's skilled. He's athletic. He's fast. He's a guy that I would like to see them get a little bit more involved. And I think that depends upon what they do at Fletch. Easy. Fletch is really that's the big domino there in terms of the interior. If Fletch moves on or retires, that's a big domino. That's a huge, huge domino there. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what they do there. What's up, Brian? How you doing, man? He says, welcome back. Looking forward to more of your shows. Go Birds. Go Birds, man. Shonuff said, I would want Snead, but where does that leave Ringo? Some of these young guys need to play. Hopefully Ringo does enough to impress Fangio for a two spot. I don't know how Fangio is going to play him, Shonuff. So take everything I'm saying right now with a grain of salt, okay? Because this was all Desai and this was all Matt Patricia. They had him as a boundary corner, not a field side. I think that if you brought in L'Jarius Sneed, that's a field side corner. So that's more of the Bradbury role. So he would be there to replace Bradbury, and I think Ringo would be the eventual replacement for Darius Slay if they see him that way. Now, the other side of this is that you have two undrafted free agents as well that you're pretty high on. It's going to be how Vic Fangio sees a lot of these guys. It's going to be interesting. I'm trying to be careful, showing up, because I don't know how Fangio is going to view him. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know until I can get in camp and see what Fangio's preferences seem to be. That's going to be tough. I was going to try to get a media pass, but seeing how Joe Castro just got turned down for a media pass, I might try to wait to a different event. It's not going to work at the Combine. The Combine's going to be way too difficult to get into. They're clearly getting stricter about that. But I'm going to see, man. I'm going to see if I would love to get in there for OTAs and see the install stuff. I want to see some of the basic concepts they're installing. I want to see what they're putting these guys through in OTAs. As long as he's not talking about race, gender, or children, family, it's all fair. I saw them crying about Jalen's clapback too. Yeah, you pushed the man. You said something that you knew was going to be a harsh clapback, and then you're going to cry about the clapback. Like, come on, I didn't like that either, China. I thought that dude came across as being pretty soft. Like, I would personally, I wouldn't put that out there. Like, I mean, I had a lot of things said to me on the football field too. I never revealed them to the officials or anything. Like, that was personal between me and the other guy across the line of scrimmage. And like, I mean, I had a lot of stuff said. I got kicked out of a game one time. I'm not even going to lie. This was a long, long time ago, but I I had to turn my jersey inside out and everything and sit on the sideline. I got kicked out of the game because I was at the bottom of a pile. And I mean, dude was just, he was taking advantage of it, man. He was getting them rib shots in on the bottom of the pile. He was getting me. And like when they finally got enough people off of us for us to separate a little bit, he tried to pull off me. I grabbed him by the face mask, put him back down, and I started slapping the ear hole. Any of y'all that play, you know exactly why I was trying to do that. I was trying to make his head ring a little bit. But, you know, of course, they only saw the action I took. They didn't see the action he was doing at the bottom of that pile. So like, I don't get that, man. I don't get why people get mad about a clapback. Like, that's just part of football. Like, you know, if you say certain things, you're going to get a strong response, right? Like, I think I love the way that Brandon Graham does it. Brandon Graham talks a lot of smack, but it's never like a real personal thing. Like, that dude made that really personal to Jalen Carter and then clap back when Jalen Carter made it real personal to him. Like, I'm not a fan, China. I'm not a fan of the way that was handled, man. I'm not a fan at all, China. I think that was bullcrap. I'm excited about this upcoming season. Yeah. And they ran that man's name through the mud so much during the offseason. They never told the story about when Jalen Carter had a teammate at UGA who did not qualify because, you know, he was there on a tryout basis and he made the football team, so he wasn't underneath scholarship. So he cannot enjoy any of the benefits of a normal student, such as working and stuff, right? But he's also not getting the same benefits in terms of the food coverage and things that the scholarship players get. So Jalen Carter was actually helping this young man out, making sure the young man was fed, was eating and stuff on campus. And they never talked about that he actually went through that lengths to help a teammate out. You only heard about this negative stuff, which I agree was egregious what happened. But like, I don't like the way they handle stuff sometimes. I just, you know, I got thoughts on it. I just don't like the way they handle it. Do you think Williams gets enough burn on the line? Also, do you think Reddick will restructure his contract? Lewis, if he wants to remain in Philadelphia and he wants to get those figures he's talking about, I think he's going to have to restructure because the only way he's going to get paid what he's asking is clearly going to be a lot of money invested in a signing bonus. That's just the way how he likes to do business. And then he likes to prorate that over several years to make it, you know, cap eligible for the Eagles, right? Flexibility against the cap. So like, I think that's, if there's a resolution, I think that is the resolution, Lewis. In terms of Williams, I do think that his playing time should uptick, but that's going to really depend upon what happens with Fletcher Cox. I mean, I don't want to push Fletch out the door. So, you know, I really like Fletch. I still think Fletch is a good player. But, I mean, it is coming at the detriment of getting guys like Milton Williams more playing time. Cal Bunny says, you watched Peyton Wilson a lot, man. Peyton Wilson's an NC State guy. So just like Simone, I was an NC State grad. Sports with Simone, we're both NC State people. So, I mean, like, we're both fairly familiar with Peyton Wilson. The thing with Peyton Wilson is going to be how comfortable you are with his early injury history. He had a lot of injuries early on at NC State. He's been relatively healthy since then. Athletically gifted and super productive. The young man has like 48, 49 tackles for loss, like just short of 50 tackles for loss over his career, which is a really high number. The guy was in double-digit sacks at NC State. I think he had above 5 interceptions at his time during NC. I can't remember the exact number of interceptions he had, guys, but I mean, he was super freaking productive there. Like, this was a really productive linebacker, off ball. He's an off ball stacked, guys. He's not an on ball. He's an off ball stacked guy. But I mean, he was pretty good. He was a really good ball player. Who do you think we draft at 22? Hard to say at this point, Sean. I got to know who's on the board. I think 22, the only problem I have with 22, Sean, is I think it's a little bit of no man's land. And I'm saying that with the understanding that, you know, Justin Jefferson was the 22nd pick in the 2020 NFL draft because we took Jalen Reagor at 21. With that said, I do think that 22 kind of gets you in this weird no man's land to where you probably like to either trade forward to get closer to that top 16 area, or you want to get backwards to accumulate more picks. And then, because I think once you get to 22, you're dealing with a lot of guys that are subjective between first and second round grades, right? I mean, you're talking about a lot of subjectivity there. So normally I think the Eagles play around that spot. And I think that's right around the spot, by the way, that we took the young man, Andre Dillard, the offensive tackle. We do like to kind of go offensive line in that area, guards, tackles, that kind of stuff. But I do think that we have a desperate need at corner. So depending on who's there in terms of the secondary, I think you've got to infuse some talent there in that secondary. So I don't know if they're going to lock into a guy yet, Sean. I got to see if they're locking into somebody. Once I know if they're going to lock into somebody, I can give you a little bit more intel of what I think they may or may not do in terms of stay put, trade forward, trade backwards. I don't have a feeling for who that guy is yet for the Eagles. And I don't think we'll know until we start seeing some of these meetings roll out, the combine meetings start getting released. I mean, we got some intel on the Senior Bowl stuff, but we need that combine meeting list, which is, I mean, we're right on that, right on the cusp, guys. That's coming up right now. So we're going to definitely learn a lot about that. Gates, I was shocked Kennard fell to the 5th in the draft. Liked him coming out of Kentucky. I thought he would be more impactful as a guard. Big boy, has a mean streak too. Do you think he is long for offensive tackle? He's got the length to play offensive tackle, one above all. I mean, what's he, like 35 inches in the arm reach, something like that, one above all, if I'm not mistaken. He's somewhere in that area, right? He's around that Lane Johnson length type. I think he's around Lane Johnson's, maybe slightly heavier than Lane. I think he's like 320 something. So I think Lane gets listed around like 315, 320, but I think from what I've watched, because, you know, Lane does a lot of the, he's involved in a lot of the fitness YouTube world. So I do see Lane actually like collaborate with a lot of people in the fitness side of YouTube. So I've watched Lane's workouts, and a lot of time Lane he says he's around 305, 310 by season's end. So, I mean, you know, I don't, you know, he's got that kind of length like that, if you will. Now, footwork matters, one above all. You know what I mean? It's not just purely the measurables. Some of it has to do with, you know, the hip in the ankle inflection. I got to see his footwork. Luckily, one above all, we've got some guys in this community that I can get taped to and put them on a live stream, and they can tell us exactly what they see as a tackle and guard. You know, we've got some guys, Jalen Williams, former collegiate offensive guard, played at Virginia State. And then we got my guy Caleb, who's a former center who played at Charleston Southern. Those dudes are really, really good at breaking down tape on these O-linemen. I plan on definitely getting them in there to break down Kennard for us, because those two guys, they can answer so many questions from the chat. They can answer so many of my questions, and they can give us valuable insight in terms of the mechanics of playing the position and what they're seeing from this young man, like what he does well, where the growth needs to be. Those guys they're elite at doing that. You know, Caleb and Jalen are really, really talented when it comes to that stuff. Justin said, Ringo and Ricks, grab one more in the draft, grab Snead or Johnson on a 1 or 2 year contract, then R&R rocking out. Ricks, Ringo, Rogers, Reed. Went with the R theme, huh? James said, hi, Coach. Your thoughts on Corley, wide receiver from Kentucky, as a slot receiver, plays well at the Senior Bowl, played well at the Senior Bowl. I'm always a little skeptical with the Senior Bowl stuff, because I've seen some guys that really played well there, and then the hype got really, really high, and then they didn't really pan out. I'm thinking of the young man that I bought into. Was it Jalen Carter, whatever his name was, that ended up getting drafted by Dallas? I bought hard in that one. Tolbert was his name. But I do think Tolbert, if you give him time to develop, can be something in Dallas, actually. So I don't think that excludes Corley. But let me take a look. James, one thing I like to do when I'm looking at these guys in terms of production, so to make sure that we're dealing with something that's, let me go to NCAA because I got it on NFL, is I like to see their stretch of games, and I like to see where they're falling in terms of production, because that can tell you a lot about the player, right? Jalen Reagor, one of the big telltale signs that we had an issue going on with Jalen Reagor was the fact that his production was really sketch. And college, you know, we had those ups and downs. A lot of us, we tended to give him a pass and say that, you know, we could probably write a lot of this off on the fact that, like, he had a lot of, you know, instability, if you will, at quarterback. You know, we gave him a pass on that with Jalen Reagor, and we needed that team speed. You know, that was the draft that we went all team speed. We went with Reagor, right? Then we went with freaking Quez and John Hightower. We were really trying to get, you know, things to be faster, if you will. So let me take a look at his offensive charts. Receiving, and see what this young man did over the course of the season. So what I like to do, guys, to see, was there any games he was held under 25 yards receiving? How many of those games? How many games was he above 50 yards or held under 50 yards? So, like, right away I see 207. Let me see total yards here. I see some yak. So he caught 55 here, 88, 107, 81, 207 against Tech, 47, 62, one game under 25 at UTEP. Okay, so one game and then ODU in the bowl game, he was at 26. I'm willing to give a scratch to the bowl games, because sometimes guys are protecting themselves for financial reasons. So I don't always throw a lot of emphasis there. But I do think that you want to go back in the film and you want to see what went right at Troy, what went right at Louisiana Tech. So he put up 107 at Troy. He put up 207 at Louisiana Tech with 3 touchdowns in that game, right? And then we need to come back and see Jacksonville State held him under 50, 47 receiving yards. So what went wrong schematically or system, from the system's perspective, what happened there? Because he had 12 targets in that game. He only had 47 yards. And then he was held to only 5 targets for 10 yards, receiving yards at UTEP. So that's only what I do is I like to look at those trends. It's not overly alarming, James, to be fair. He was a fairly productive guy. So that's good. You don't have 5 out of 12 games where he was held under 50 yards. Then you got a legitimate concern. You got a Jalen Rager level productivity concern where you're basing it all off of projections of athleticism, right? So that's what I would start is I would want to see what went right in a couple of those games, what went wrong in a couple of those games, and try to figure out where I would sit with it. Ringo can be a good number 2. We need to draft a great prospect for number 1 to replace Slay. China said, is there any possibility of some Miami players following Fangio? Yes, there's 2 that I've heard of recently that got mentioned a lot of. So the first one is what we talked about earlier, which is Andrew Van Ginkel, who's more of like an on-ball Sam. So think like Haason Reddick, Nolan Smith type. He kind of plays that role there. So he's a guy that is a free agent. There's been some buzz that the Eagles might seek, signing him because of his connections back to Vic Fangio. And then they have what was the young man's name? He was a safety who was originally in Baltimore, who was a free agent. And he would be a pretty good acquisition for the Eagles, honestly. Let me take a look. I can find his name here if I look through this list. Deshaun Elliott. So he played at Texas. Good measurable size guy, 6'1", 210. Originally came out of the Baltimore system into Miami. He's a guy that I think, has some potential to be a starting quality safety, but at the very minimal, you're getting a very solid number 3 safety. And I do think the Eagles, especially if Kevin Byard is not back, if Kevin Byard is eventually just let go, if something happens on that front, then I think you have to have an answer there, right? You need 3 guys you can depend upon. So either through the draft or you got to make a young signing, like a young guy that's got a little experience in the league, but is not over the hill. So a Deshaun Elliott kind of signing, you mix that in with Reed, you mix that in with Sidney Brown. Now you got it's not a huge signing. This isn't like some high, prized, kind of free agent here, but this is a guy that can come in and play some quality snaps for the Eagles. So I would look for something like that. But like Shonuff said, Jalen Johnson's a guy that I've been pretty high on in terms of the outside secondary. Would you have to pay? Don't know if a 1 or 2 year contract is going to do. Yeah, I don't know what he's looking for, Shonuff, in terms of the contract. I can make estimates just based upon previous contracts and just kind of my gut feeling of where he ranks in terms of the players and how the league views them. I could probably make a fairly accurate. I mean, I can make it fairly accurate in terms of the year, the length of the years, and the total money. But in terms of the structure of the contract, Shonuff, that's really tough to predict. So that he's a guy like I would have interest in Jalen Johnson personally, guys. I think he's a really good physical corner. I think he is an actual free agent right now. It looks like Chicago is in a little bit of a situation there to where they may or may not have the money to bring him back. So, yeah, I think Shonuff, I think you're right. Depending upon the contract, what does that look like? Sure. Byard and Maddox can take turns helping each other move out of their house. You want Eddie Jackson at safety? Any underrated college guys you want us to look out for? What do you think about Colorado State's tight end, Holker, I believe? I haven't had a chance to go that deep yet, Eagles Realist, in terms of like the underrated prospects. At the end of March, beginning of April, I always do my series of videos where I will take a look at a lot of the D2, D3 prospects. And then I'll also take a look at some of the HBCU prospects that don't always get the same amount of coverage. So that's going to definitely be coming up. I'm going to be pulling probably 10 to 20 guys in total. It'll be somewhere between 10 to 20 guys. I'm going to give a look at and give, breakdown of what I'm seeing from those guys, from those type of schools, D2, D3. Then of course, just HBCU prospects. So, I mean, that'll definitely be coming up, guys. I don't have any name specifically for you right yet. With Fangio now being here, Milton Williams should be BG's replacement, in my opinion. It makes sense. that interior and outside guy. Got to can play inside and outside. Sure enough. If anyone deserves a media pass, it's definitely you, Gate City. I trust you to be a better coach than Nick, to be honest. Appreciate that, man. Do you think Isaiah Rodgers will be a long-term solution at cornerback, and will he get return snaps over Covey? Glizzy, that's an excellent question. Both questions are great questions. We talked about the return game. I don't know that he's going to get punt return responsibilities over Covey because I think Covey actually had a pretty dang good season. But Isaiah Rodgers is explosive. He's a good player, and I could see him getting some kick return, numbers. In terms of long-term solution at cornerback, I think it's to be determined, right, Glizzy? I think that what I saw in Indianapolis is a guy that has talent. I saw a guy that reminds me a lot of Avonte Maddox, a young man that has a lot of experience playing outside at cornerback, but has all the underlying athleticism of a nickel corner. He just doesn't have the experience playing it. I'm curious what they do there. He's a guy that I'm really curious what happens once we get to camp. How are they using him? Because he could definitely be someone that we all forget is even on the team, and all of a sudden at camp we start hearing that name like, oh, Isaiah Rodgers is cooking in camp. This dude's going to be on the team. He's going to be an integral part of the 2024 Eagles. Like, he's one of the, I'm trying to keep him at my forefront of my mind because I think he'd be easy to kind of forget he's even on the roster just because he was assigned and on the commissioner's exempt list. So, the initial praise was, we all were pretty excited about that signing. And then we kind of, we all fell into like, hey, we got Kaylee Ringo. We got, you know what I mean? All these other guys. Please, God, I hope you're able to get better there for the OTAs. Yeah, I want to get in for the OTAs. What position did you play, Gate? Mostly quarterback throughout most of my time there, but I also played, back in the day, we called it offensive end, which is like a glorified tight end receiver type position. That was, we were talking late 90s, early 2000s, and then I played a little running back. The game I'm referencing to where I got actually taken out of, I was playing running back, and it's just, stuff happens at the bottom of those piles, China. It's not fun. It's not fun at all, but I mostly played quarterback for most of the time I was there. Safety Williams from Miami is a freak at safety. I was watching. Yeah, he's good. He's good, Antonio. BG puts the class in trash talk. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, he doesn't make it like he's making fun of you, but he's not making it like really personal. You know what I mean? Like, he's just clapping back a little. He's just a talker. I was watching Kitchen's game, and Williams was huge, fast, and making plays. One above all says, Gates, be glad you weren't at the bottom of the pile and have your junk grope like Vrabel did to Ike Reese. Ike tells this story. I don't know how I would handle that when I'm one above all. I don't know how I would handle that one. Yeah. No, that never happened to me, sir. I can say that. I never had that situation happen, but yeah. But we all know what happens at the bottom of those piles, man. It's not very civil, to say the least. I give respect to guys like my guy Philly Fresh. He played running back for the majority of the time he played football, and I got to tell you, man, I spent a year or two playing running back, and I didn't love it. There's a certain mindset to play that position. It's you need a certain mindset to be there. There's got to be a little something off there, right? You know what I mean? Like, you got to have a little bit of an edge to you to play running back. Linebackers the same way, especially like off-ball stacked. I think there's got to be a little edge to you, right? You got to feel a little disrespected at the slightest thing. You know what I mean? Like, those guys, there's an edge to their personalities. They also never talk about the fact that Carter is also mourning the loss of a friend. Exactly, China, exactly. I agree he should be held accountable for his role in the situation, but he is not the monster media wants him to be. Yeah, that's the part that bothers me as well, is that they're making him out to be like he's a monster, right? You're right, a monster. Like, he's this terrible guy, and he's not that. I mean, it's sad. It's sad that people will do a lot of things to garner attention. And that's what it comes down to me, China, is that they're just trying to garner attention. And they're doing it at his expense. And they're doing it at the expense of the person who, lost the two individuals who lost their lives too. Sorry, guys. The chat's freezing up on occasion. The draft will depend on what we do in free agency. 100% agree, show enough. I say trade back and pick up another third or fourth because right now we have no fourth round pick. Yeah, that's right. We did trade it. I guess that was part of the package we used last year in all the movings and dealings we did. Justin said from the vids I was looking at, it was the footwork weakness with Kennard, Justin. Crowley would be an amazing in our offense and immediate impact player. Gate, who would you pick in the first, second, and third rounds? It's tough right now, Roji, to say. I can't say definitively. Right now, as I analyze our roster, I can't say who's going to be there necessarily at 22. I don't feel strongly about any particular player at this exact moment in terms of saying I would move up or I would move back to be in position yet. I still, I got to see more tape on a lot of these guys. I got to be able to see what they do at the combine. The combine's not as useful as people think, but it does tell you a little bit. The biggest thing it tells me, Roji, is I get accurate measurements on these individuals. Because when you go to like pro days and you go to personal workouts, and Jalen Williams talked about this a lot. He talked about sometimes these guys will measure the top of your hairline opposed to like the combines on your scalp. So they're on your scalp when they measure you. They're not giving you your hairline. So like things like that, like there's some inconsistencies sometimes with these measurements, especially if you look at what the schools list these guys as and you see the combine measurements, you're like, man, that was way, way off. But yeah, it's stuff like that. So I have preferences in terms of depending on what we do in free agency, which is to Shonuff's point, depending on what is done in free agency, I still think we need off-ball linebacker. I still think that you can make a case that we need at least one more rush end. I think that Brandon Graham's not going to be here forever, and I think we're a little light there. I think we definitely need playmakers in the secondary, and I think we still need a third receiver. I still think we need a slot receiver. We need those positions to me matter a lot. Depending on how you feel about the offensive line and just knowing the Eagles, they're probably going to expend at least one pick on an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman, interior D lineman, just because they like to throw those darts at the board and just see if they strike gold. So, I mean, it's hard to say right now, guys. There's so much still moving to say definitively. It was the same buzz about Titans linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair following Fangio to Philly. Huh. Some buzz, not same buzz. My bad, showing up. Huh. I like that name. I actually like the player a lot. That's interesting. That's the thing, showing up. And I like the way you're doing this is you're looking at the connections back to the coaching staff. I think that's the smart way of analyzing it because there'll be some interest. It doesn't mean the player will end up in Philly. Contract still matters, right? But you definitely can tell that mostly these guys want to bring in some guys that they're familiar with. They want to bring in their guys. Chase Young to replace Reddick from the 49ers, Chase Young? I didn't know that they were interested in moving him. Always avoid the pile-on laugh aloud unless it's a fumble. I've done some dirty stuff in the pile-on, but it was well-deserved. Yeah, man, what happens at the bottom of those piles is it's not civil, it's not polite, to say the least. Yep, Kennard, I think guard will be a better fit for him. Opop said Kalen King or Kool-Aid would be my first. And Xavier Worthy, my second round pick. Justin doesn't like Kalen King. You're crazy. He's going to be a dog. All right. He said, I knew Sauce would be a dog. Young's contract is up now. I can take a look for you real quick. Let me see. Chase Young. Let's see. Let's do contract. I was going to do 49ers, but let me just see. So he signed a 4-year, $34.5 million contract with the Washington Commanders, including a 22.6 signing bonus. All right. In 2024, Young will earn a base salary of 17.4 while carrying a cap hit of 17.4. So it looks like to me, easy. It looks like he's on that 5th-year option. So he was drafted in 20. So he's on his 5th-year option, right? So I guess the 49ers will have the option to exercise that, I'm assuming. Now look, Easy, you might be aware that perhaps they've already decided not to exercise it. I don't know. I haven't really looked into them, Easy, so I can't say if they decided whether or not they were going to exercise the 5th-year option, but it looks like that's in play potentially, that they could exercise that 5th-year option. Now, do they view him as being worth $17.4 million? I don't know, man. I think Chase Young has a lot of upside, but I don't think his production has been the greatest. I thought he played pretty well for San Fran, though. To be fair to him, I thought he was pretty good once he got in there. But, I mean, we'll see. Antonio, so did they decide not to take the 5th-year option? Because he's the number 1 over pick, so they got a 5th-year option on him. So did they decline the 5th-year option? I guess I could look it up, guys. Chase Young, 5th-year option. Says the Commanders declined it. So Washington, I guess, set that into motion. So it looks like he is a free agent, guys. Yeah. So if Washington declined it before the trade, then I guess San Francisco never even got the opportunity to claim it, since it would have already been contractually, I guess, declined. So, yeah. So I guess he would be a free agent, guys. Yeah, I don't know what the price would be on him, guys. To be fair, Easy and Antonio, I have no clue what kind of market he's looking for. He's prototypical size linebacker, right? I mean, if you look at Vic Fangio's system, he normally likes that one in-betweener. He likes the Von Miller type, right? The on-ball, if you want to call it, overhang, Sam linebacker type, the Von Millers, the Haason Reddicks, the Nolan Smith types, right? The Andrew Van Ginkel from Miami, those types. I mean, you can go some of the guys he brought in is when these guys were getting injured. I mean, you can look at like a Bruce Irvin. Bruce Irvin fits that mold, those type of twitchy type players. And then he normally likes that typical sized edge player, right? So think about your Jalen Phillips, your Bradley Chubb, your Josh Sweats, right? Your Chase Youngs. I guess it depends upon the contract and like what's happening with Reddick, what's happening with, Josh Sweat. I mean, are we going to see movement there? I mean, there's a lot to consider to that move, right? Easy. Like, I think that would almost be deserving of a video where I put actual consideration into the contract and like each player and how the Eagles might shake that out. I think it needs to be a little bit more research before I said strongly one way or the other. That makes sense. Easy. But yeah, you're absolutely right. From what I can see, the 5th-year option was declined by Washington. We need a 3rd receiver and a 2nd tight end. Our tight end play has disappeared in the last 2 seasons with injury to DJ. Yeah, Cockrell, I agree. Yeah, we need something that's a little bit more of a backup plan for Dallas Goedert's injuries. I agree. Yeah. Yeah, so you could add that to the draft list, right? Slot wide receiver, a legitimate, talented backup tight end. We've taken a lot of darts at the board at prospects and tried to develop these guys, but we just haven't really had luck at getting one of those guys really sticking to hit. I mean, perhaps they're going to give, what's that young man's name? Ogobonum? I think I'm saying his name really wrong, but Alberto. Maybe they're going to give Alberto some run during the offseason now to see if he can fill into that kind of role. But I definitely think that you got a point there, the Cockrell, that can be viewed as a legitimate need. Said Chase free agent, yes. I think Washington declined the option. Yeah, you're right, Easy. They did. Yeah, that's what it said in the news releases I saw. His market value was 12 to 13 million. I would say depends on contract structure and what he's willing to agree to, Antonio. So you can never have too many pass rushers. I'm just going to say that right from the jump. So I'm not inherently opposed to signing Chase Young. You can never have too many of those guys. I will say that it depends upon what he would agree to in terms of the contract structure, because we know how he likes to do. He'll give you your market value, but it's going to be the way that he wants to structure the contract to get you the market value. So how receptive would Chase Young be to such a structure? I don't know the answer to that, to be fair, Antonio, but I think it comes down to that. Isn't Smith better in the slot? I don't know if I'd say that. Devontae Smith, is that what you're referring to? I don't know that I would say Devontae is necessarily better in the slot. I think he can do it. I think AJ's also quite good as being that physical slot. I think the Eagles, if you take Nick at face value easy, where he says he believes in alignment-less wide receiver play, but then again, we didn't see a lot of alignment lists with Quez. I still think that they need a natural slot. Personally, easy. I don't know that I would say Devontae's a natural slot. I don't think that AJ's a natural slot. I just think they're both talented guys that can do it. I think they need that natural, And I know that you could say the case like, yeah, Gabe, me and you might agree with that, but Nick in the front office, like, they might be looking for more of that guy that can play all three alignments, and that's true. I mean, that's true. We might all be looking into that slot, and that might only be a part of their evaluation for what they want to do in terms of getting the third wide receiver. They might want a guy that gives them that ability to play inside, outside, and that might limit the candidates, if you will. So it's a fair point, Easy, if that's what you mean by that. We could find a backup tight end in free agency or late in the draft. Need a number 3, but that again would be a later pick. I want to know what number 22 going to be like. The cornerback position is so deep in this draft. Justin said he thinks that we're going to go the trenches, honestly, linebacker or safety, best available. It's a lot of cornerbacks out there. Yeah, I mean, that all that stuff always comes in. All that stuff always comes into play. I mean, Justin, I think that's all fair that what we probably deem like not necessarily the market value in terms of the contract, but like the market value in terms of draft capital and just if there's a surplus of players, right? There's always a chance that, Justin, and that's why I can't answer right now. You see how I'm being like really hesitant to answer this, but I can't say that I feel like the Eagles have fallen in love with an outside player in terms of, the cornerback position, in terms of what's available in this 2024 NFL draft. I don't have a good feel on that right now. We don't see the actual pre-combine, kind of meetings yet. There's not enough intel yet to feel one way or the other. It's tough to say. It's tough to say at this point, but I do agree that you have an overall point that sometimes the pure quantity and, how rich a position could be in a draft can influence when you'll take a guy. We ain't owing Chase nowhere near what he wants. If he wants $5 million, come on down. Yeah, and so much of that is like Howie's just the way he structures contracts is unique. I think a lot of teams are picking up on what Howie does, and we're seeing a lot of teams adopt to it, if you will, adopt his methods. But, the players got to be willing to agree to that. I would think that there's a lot of, personally, Justin, I would think there's a lot of motivation to accept if you got an owner that's willing to pay you, and that's part of why some of these teams don't do that. So if you give a signing bonus, the player's got to be paid, and the owner's got to agree to pay that money out. You know what I mean? Like, that's why some of these organizations don't do that. Part of that is Jeffrey Lurie willing to pay. So if you got a guy that's willing to take a pretty big salary, a signing bonus, and then allow that to be prorated over so many years, it just stabilizes the cap impact of that said player. So, I would think there's a lot of motivation for a player to do that. I mean, the money's up front. It's yours. You don't have to worry about fighting over the guarantees, right? You can get an X percentage of your contract handed right to you in your hand, which makes probably the rest of the negotiations a little smoother. But you need an owner willing to do it and a guy who's talented enough to navigate the complexity of the cap situation, right? Because the cap's very malleable, right? There's hard set numbers, of course, but it's malleable in terms of the contract structures. So that's a part of it. Like, when we get into like, would Chase Young sign here? Like, I can't predict those things. You know what I mean, guys? I don't know. I know the Eagles value the defensive line. I think if the value is right, I think that's what Justin's alluding to is that, figures are figures. We can make up any money. That doesn't matter. It's about if they deem the contract to be worth it. If they say this is a value for the player, we value the trenches, look how long they kept on, they kept hold of different players in terms of trench players, how long they held those guys that they drafted in particular. You know what I mean? Like, it took us a long time, to disperse of certain guys that we drafted along the trenches. So CD eats in the slot. Hint, hint. Yeah, it's fair, Antonio. He does. Our division is going to be tough this year. 10-6 might be our record. Gate, are you going to the first game overseas? Birds versus Pittsburgh and Brazil. I would love to go to Brazil, but I don't know. I got to see what that's going to cost. I've been to Brazil before, Roji, when I was in the military. Actually, I got put on the Reagan's when the Reagan did its world cruise when it came out of the shipyards. I actually I was on the Ike at the time, but they sent me TAD there because we had to get our qualifications. So they sent a bunch of us to go get our like yellow shirt qualifications so we can move birds in the hangar bay. And the guys that worked on V1 that were on the flight deck. So a lot of us actually went TAD on that world cruise. But yeah, I mean, it's a nice place, man. Justin said, "Laugh out loud." Yeah, it's tough, man. Like when you're talking about contract values and like it's so tough. Like I know they value the position. I know the player, depending on the contract value, they're probably, you know what I'm saying, would probably want to add that player, but we got to look at the fact that any player you add is detracting away snaps from somebody else. But I also, I kind of agree, Justin. I kind of agree with some of these guys that are saying, like, what is behind Josh Sweat right now? You got Nolan Smith kind of behind Reddick as a guy you can develop, but Brandon Graham's getting up there in years. And Brandon Graham's kind of an in-betweener that they move all along the line of scrimmage. So, like, who's really behind? You got Teron Jackson, you got guys like that. But it's a fair point. I don't know that I have the answer to it, I'll say this. I mean, I'd be pretty excited if we made that signing because it shows that we are committed to 24. Like, we would be definitely giving indicators that we're not messing around about 2024. My wife ain't letting me go to Brazil by myself. I might be missing in action. That's funny, Antonio. Yeah. No, that's be pretty expensive to get down there too. So yeah, I don't know. I got to look at. I'd have to see what the flights cost, all that kind of stuff, and I have to look into it. I definitely want to go to a couple home games this year, but I got to see how that all fits, and then I'll let you guys in on a little something. So I can't give full details of everything yet, but I'll give you guys a little bit of information that'll explain some of this. Okay. I had to rip off stickers from my hoodie just to do this live stream. I have a newborn niece who was born preemie and is in the NICU. And currently my wife and I are her safety providers, and it may lead down the road to where we have to take custody of individual is a potential outcome of that. As a matter of fact, somebody in our community knows this because on like Wednesday, no, it was Tuesday night. So it wasn't yesterday. It was the night before. My battery died and I left my jumper cables, and somebody who is a part of this community on YouTube, it watches their security officer at the Moses Cone Hospital. And they saw my Philly stuff on and were like, "Yo, you're an Eagles fan." And we got to talking, and they figured I was a content creator, and they actually, someone from our community actually helped me out in that situation because I had to jump start my car to get to Advanced Auto to grab a new battery and install it real quick. So like, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to have to pick my games. You know what I'm saying? So I got to pick the games I'm going to go to because I do have, I know the newborn is going to come here. There's so much more information behind this, guys. I just cannot release right now. When the time is right, some of you guys I've known for years, I will tell you everything. But I just, you know how these situations go, guys. I can't release everything about the situation, but there's definitely some stuff kind of going on behind the scenes there with that. So once I can figure that out, guys, I will let you know what the home games are going to look like. What games we're going to choose to go to, because I definitely want to get to 2 games. I want to try to link up with my guy LB, my guy Mike. I want to, my guy Reese, Philly Fresh. I want to try to see if we can't coordinate our schedules to do like one big, like, kind of tailgate thing. We can either, I guess we can jump into E-Rock stuff, or we'll just do some stuff out there. We'll get into one of the tailgate lots, and we'll throw up. I got plenty of tarps and tables and everything, and we could do some cooking. We'll do something, man. I definitely want to do something because it's been a while, man. Like I miss those old days, guys. I don't know if y'all remember those old school Battle Birds podcast stuff. I miss those days, man. When we used to do those really long live streams, like that was like a real community, man. That was a real community. Like I miss those days, even though 5 hours would be incredibly tough to do a live stream now. I don't even think I would have voice for that anymore. But like I do miss those days a little bit. So like I do want to get back into that again to where we can all kind of meet up. I'm lending a lot of my football stuff right now. I have a young man who's trying to become the starting quarterback at Page High School here in Greensboro. So I lent him a lot of my gear and stuff I had. But, once he's done utilizing and using that stuff, I can bring it down there for the kids I got nets and stuff we can throw into. So if you got some kids out there, you want to do some football tosses with them and stuff, like I want to set some stuff up like that, guys. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to make sure that we give all you guys enough time frame to get tickets if you guys want to be a part of that, because I want it to be a big set of content creators out there together as a community. So that way we can all be kind of together and we can do stuff, football toss, all that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, man, I'm going to definitely, I'll let you guys know when we get that all set up, man. Imagine Dallas Turner or Jarrett Verse or Latu. How do you say his name? Latu slipping. Howie pulling that trigger. I need to pay attention to how they say his name because I have no clue how to say his name. And I was watching a film of him the other day, and I was hoping they said his name, Justin, and they didn't say his name. And I was like, dude. So I'm just gonna pull it up and just see. I could probably just do the Google Translate. But yeah. Apparently, Fangio will be focused on linebacker more. That's what I heard too, Easy. I heard he's going to off-ball in particular. Off-ball stacked linebackers. Leffel, I'll take me with you, Tonio. Have or wives on the plane the next day. Want to see how Howie will free up some money. I know extending Bayard is a possibility. Yeah, that's the same thing I heard. Like they could free up like $9 million, sure enough. I know a lot of you guys want me to do a cap version, and I guess I can. I need to do it this week though, because like we're already rolling into March. So let me see if I can clear something for this weekend to get a video out that just kind of goes over some of the likely situations that can occur for cap flexibility. I got to do it fast though, because those moves are going to start happening. Like, you know what I mean? So let me see what I can't do real fast, show enough, and I'll see if I can't put a video out for this weekend to kind of get everybody on the same page in terms of, okay, these are the potential moves. They're never going to do every one of those things, but these are the ways in which money can be created just by looking over the numbers. We all know that the easiest way is like you take base salary and you convert it into bonus option-based money. You turn it into a signing bonus if you just want to get it to the player without any frustration. You turn it into option-based money if you want to create restrictions on it. So, if the players are willing. Extending buyers got to go. We know you being the man God made you to be, brother. Respect. I appreciate you, Justin. Antonio said, I am coming if Battlebirds podcast is coming. I'm trying to get everybody to link up, Antonio. I want everybody to be there. Like, I haven't, outside of like talking to Reese here and there on Twitter and stuff, because I haven't really been on YouTube as much. I know LB hasn't been on YouTube as much either. I saw his video the other day where he was apologizing for kind of slipping up on not making as much content as we normally do. So, yeah, we're definitely going to – I want to get everybody together. LB's kind of like almost a fourth member of Battlebirds podcast at this point. I'm pretty sure that he's clearly the most consistent special guest that we've had on the Battlebirds podcast, but we've had pretty much everybody on there at some point. So, yeah, let me see what we can't do, guys. Let me see if we can't set something up. Hey, let me know. I'll catch a flight for sure. Hell yeah, I was on those every time. Yeah, man, those were, the old Battlebird podcast with Mike and Reese. Oh my gosh, bro, those used to be 5 hours. I mean, I remember there were times when we would start at like 7, 8 o'clock at night, and I don't think we were getting off there until like 2 o'clock in the morning. We weren't even talking football past like the second or third hour. We were just talking. I remember that. That was so long ago, man. Let's do it. Brazil, Oregon. Praying for your family and niece. Thank you, China. I'm doing a nurse externship in the women's hospital, and a patient requested me to work with her baby because she says my Eagles badge on her. Hey, that's cool, man. That's cool. Yeah, China. There's some more stuff behind the scenes with her. So we have a lot of nurses that are working with us, and to be clear, we have like a speech pathologist that's working with us when it comes to, her name is Elena, my niece. So we have a speech pathologist that's working with us there. And a lot of the nurses are, I've definitely, we've had her sister, her older sister, which is also my niece. She's lived with us now for like 4 years, but she's older, China. So I had to start from the beginnings. Like, luckily I got guys like LB and Mike and those guys that I know well that have raised infants. They've had to go through that before. My brother Joe, those guys have, so they helped me out. But I didn't know anything, China. I didn't even know how to hold the kid. Like I had to learn all that, So yeah, that's part of it. What's been going on. So Yeah. Yeah. Is Bradbury worth keeping? Fair question, Dennis. I mean, it just depends upon how much of this was related to the scheme and just the flow of the season. How much of this is due to the regression due to age. And I mean, look, playing on the outside is tough, man. Those guys are the most underrated football players. They're athletic as crap. If you're playing cornerback, you're a very athletically gifted young man. However, I will say that there's no cushion there, man. Once your legs give, once that slight dip in your athleticism occurs, once age wins, because let's be real, age is, it's undefeated. We got people like Champ Bailey and some of those guys that fought age for a long time and did a good job, but it's undefeated. So, I mean, it's tough to say, Dennis. I mean, it's a fair question. I don't know. I mean, we won't really know until either the Eagles make that decision for us and they move on, or until we see them in camp and we see like, okay, this is clearly still a problem. He said, no, he ain't worth keeping, but his contract shaking my head. We ain't worth letting go either. Extending buyer doesn't necessarily mean he's staying. It's to free up money, and then you could trade or release him. Fair. It's true, show enough. That is true. Go Birds. What's up, Emily? I want him gone personally. Some people think with our new coaches, he'll somewhat have a chance. Bounce back here. But he needs to go. The way his contract is set up, gonna make it hard to let him go. Yeah, I know that his contract is quite significant. I mean, obviously, a couple of years ago, this was one of the best safeties in the league, so he was paid like it. But yeah, I mean, you're probably going to see some kind of an extension or something done there, I would assume, with him. Call him Papa Gates. That's funny, guys. Heck no, Bradbury is not worthy of keeping. Did you see him? Whoa. Yeah, they're going to have to make the evaluation there. I mean, only internally do they really know. Like, here's the complicated thing about Bradbury, right? DK McDonald is gone, who was the secondary coach. Vic Fangio really only knows him from 2022 when he was having an all-pro-like season. And that was during the backslide of the back half of the season. So, like, it's tough, man. Like, he's not an easy read because age is undefeated. He's above 30 years old. I do think there were some things schematically we could have done that were we could have used Bradbury better than what we did. But I also think, like, you got a 30-year-old corner, and you got another one that's going to be, like, what, 33? Is that right about Darius Slay's going to be, like, 33? So, I mean, like, at a certain point, okay, you got Ringo, who will eventually take the helm from what we saw. I mean, Fangio can change all this, guys. We don't know Fangio's preferences, but Fangio could change that to, from him being considered the field corner and the backup for Slay and the eventual replacement for Slay, where they could play him on the boundary. Time will tell that. I don't know. But they need another younger guy. I mean, maybe they believe in some of these undrafted free agents coming up the pipeline. I don't know. I think Fangio is going to have a lot of say in this. The problem with Fangio is how long is Fangio going to be here, though, too? That's the other thing. Is like, not because he's going to get a head coaching gig, but correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but isn't Fangio pushing like 70 years old? I mean, he's getting a little up there in age. What's up, Charlie? How you doing, man? Is it fair to judge our defense of players based on last season, though? Everyone was bad last year, but we've seen them be good. Yeah, it's tough, China. I agree that there has to be like an honest evaluation somehow, and it's going to be, the waters are going to be very muddied in terms of how you evaluate it, right? I mean, Fangio's got a tough job here. He's got to decide between these veteran groups of guys and, like, who still has anything left. Like, it's tough. It's going to be tough. I hope everything works out for you and that child, bro. Thanks, Connected Dots. Yeah, we're doing our best. We're doing our best. We've had a lot of support, man. We've had neighbors pile in and help us because, like, we had to have, the basics, bassinet, the crib, the, car seat, everything. We had to, all that had to be done in like less than 30 days time frame here. And, that was tough, man. Like that was definitely like we're thankful that we have people that gave enough, cared enough to help out, that they didn't have to involve themselves in the situation at all, but they empathized with the situation that we were placed into, and they came to help us quickly. I mean, like my next door neighbors, man, they're Eagle fans too. So shout them out. But my next door neighbors, like, they really, they helped out a lot. They're good people. Justin said Bradbury and Slay on the outside, Rogers, Ringo, possibly draft pick, and Ricks in the rotation, Reed and Question in the back end. Am I the only one who thinks Bradbury has lost confidence here in Philly from the Super Bowl holding call, getting called trash, and then getting burnt? It's possible, Dennis. I mean, we don't know what, obviously we don't know what's going on internally. I will say that Bradbury's a very professional guy. He's not going to give you a lot of emotions, right? He's going to keep everything kind of even keeled underneath his skin, if you will. So it's hard to say like what's truly bothering him or not, because he just doesn't speak about it, right? He just kind of says basically, yeah, I got to do my job. I just got to be better. And then he kind of moves on with it, China can't nothing be justified by James Bradbury last year. That play was buns. What do you think about San Fran firing Wilkes? I was scratching my head. Yeah, that's puzzling. They fired Steve Wilkes for real? Their defense was pretty good, man. You knew he was out of there after they lost. Whew. What's up, Allie? Says, how do you feel about Fangio as defensive coordinator? I mean, you might as well get the guy that system you've been seeking to install. They've been trying to do that for years now. Concerned about his age, but respect the nature of what he is. Like, the guy is a talented coach. Defensive coordinator, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm concerned that I'm not too sure that, a guy that's, I think he's in his late 60s or early 70s, guys. Am I making that up about Vic Fangio? Let me go check that, guys, because I don't want to be sitting here saying this man is that old when he's not anywhere near that. But I think I'm making that up, guys. My bad. He's 65. So he's got more run than I was just saying. My bad. I thought he was like 68 or like 72 or something, but he's only like 65. So I don't made that man sound like he was in a wheelchair here. He's not. So yeah, my only concern, Allie, would be like if a year or two into it, if he doesn't want out, just wants to retire, get away from football, that'd be my only concern there. As he approaches that 67, 68 kind of time frame, you know what I mean? So it may not be a long-term solution either, but I respect the man's name. It's so true. I don't know. You don't rotate corners, just next man up, and a guy gets injured. Dennis said Wilkes was scapegoated. Yeah, it feels like it, Dennis. If they released him, he had a solid season. I thought he was pretty good. We should see if we can get him as an assistant coach. Yeah. I agree. Wilkes was definitely scapegoated. You're right, sure enough. So Ringo would be third, and then depending on how high we draft a cornerback, possibly him or Ricks. Yeah. Yeah, also depending on what they do contractually, Justin, right? With Bradbury and with Slay and kind of like what happens there. If they move on from either player, that can definitely shake things up. But yeah. What's up, H Killer? He said, Brandon Smith is a player I think fans will like once we get to training camp. He's talented. Yeah, we kind of talked about Brandon Smith and Julian Okwara at the beginning of the stream. And I talked about, you're talking about guys that are 6'3", 6'4", 250-ish. They both got over 34 inches in the arm reach. They both have over 80-inch wingspans. They're both fairly athletically gifted players. They're both fairly strong guys. So for these kind of, if you're viewing them as being these overhangs that could potentially set the edge, they have that underlying length and strength to maybe play a little bit more into Fangio's hands of the way he likes to play his defenses. It's going to be interesting to see how they use those guys. He said, Justin said, I think they still believe in Job too. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one, Justin. I don't know. I don't know how they feel about Josh Jobe. I don't know how they feel about, Eli Ricks. We got to see how Fangio feels, right? That's the thing. We got to see how the front office and Fangio mesh on these players and what they think of them. H Killer 123. I was thinking the same thing. Nick and Kyle scapegoated their coaches. Laugh out loud. Yeah, I didn't think Brian Johnson was the bigger problem. Easy, I'm not going to lie. I'm not saying Brian Johnson was perfect and we didn't pay some startup costs for, a rookie play caller at the NFL level. I don't think he was the problem, man. I think the relationship between Nick and him was the problem. I don't think Nick trusted him enough to give him some play in terms of the install in the game plan, but gave that man the assignments of calling the plays and then would intervene at times. I felt that Brian Johnson got a little scapegoated here, personally. With that said, I do think that Kellen Moore is a smart hire, but I don't know what to attribute to Kellen Moore. I did that video on Kellen Moore Easy. I'm pretty sure you saw that one by now, but I talked about Kellen Moore and I said, he's primarily worked underneath offensive-minded coaches. So when you talk about the install and stuff like that, I don't know the nature of the relationship between Jason Garrett and Kellen Moore. I don't know the nature of the relationship between, Kellen Moore and what's his name? Chunky up there in Dallas. What's his name? He wants to be Vince Lombardi. Mike McCarthy. I don't know the nature of the relationship. I mean, Jason Garrett took play calling away from Kellen Moore late in the 2019 season and then went on to nosedive the season and lose, and the Eagles went into the playoffs that year because of that. And then Mike McCarthy made those comments about running the ball after they let, Kellen Moore go. So I don't know the nature of the relationship there. You know what I mean? So it's hard to say like how much effect he had over the install and then the actual game plan. He had some effect. I just don't know the extent of it. Now, we do know that he was primarily responsible for the majority of the seasons that he was there for the in-game play calls. So, I mean, it's tough to say, guys. Terrell Lewis on our futures deals is a beast. I forgot about Terrell Lewis, Antonio. That's a good point. It's a good point to bring up. I completely forgot about Terrell Lewis as well being here, and that they had let me see combine results. Let me see because that's going to be like interesting the way that they're approaching this and like what they're looking for. So yeah, Alabama linebacker 2020 class. So like they're definitely going back to the last couple of draft classes and getting involved. But okay, here we go again, guys. 6'5", 260 pounds, 33.88-inch arm reach, so just short of 34 inches. Julian Akwar, 34.38 inches. Brandon Smith, 34.63 inches. Terrell Lewis, 33.88 inches with an 83.38-inch wingspan. These long, rangy players that can play, kind of on ball. They can play on ball if you it's probably where they're better fits in the NFL. So I don't see his testing numbers, guys. I'd have to look into his testing numbers. I don't have that readily handy. But good point. Good point, Antonio. I completely forgot about it. Laugh out loud. Nick coaches needed to go, though. Yes, and Nick too. I was hoping Nick would get fired after the season and we'd hire Ben Johnson from Detroit. But I'm not mad at surrounding Nick with experienced coaches. The players stood up for Nick. Yeah, I was never in favor of firing Nick, guys. No matter what we think about Nick, he's been in the playoffs every single year he's been a coach, and he's been in the Super Bowl. He's quality. Now, I do think that we've learned that with Nick, if this thing's going to be successful, he's got to have trusted guys around him. And it can't just be any mismatch of matches. You just can't just say this guy's an up-and-coming coach, so put him in with Nick. Like, no, for the sanity of all of us and for the, effectiveness of the install of the offense and the, game plans going in, like, you need to have a guy that Nick is comfortable with, clearly. Because when you had Nick around Steichen, you had him around Gannon, number one, he adjusted one year to when things were going downhill. We saw he could make those adjustments. He could do the things that are necessary to be done as a coach. But number two, we saw that if you give him the right system of guys around him, he can take this team to a Super Bowl. Obviously he's going to have a lot of faith in Vic. I don't know. That's what I was getting to, guys, in that conversation I was having about Kellen Moore. I don't know the nature of the relationship with Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni. I don't know how close they are. There's really no way of knowing that information. I would say that I don't know that this is like a Shane Steichen where they came up together. So there was a lot of trust there, as much as this is like, I need to cover my own, self-preservation, if that makes sense. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, I do have like a little, you know what I mean? I'm up in the air there. with Akwar and Lewis additions, I doubt edge would be in our first few picks. Interior defensive line or that big tackle we looking at sounds reasonable. Same. I also wanted Ben Johnson. Imagine Malata in that sole role in the run game. Shonoff said, yeah, I like Brandon Smith. Played well at Penn State. We've also brought in some decent positional coaches, so I hope these guys can develop these players. Yeah. Nick won't try Kellen or Vic like that. I don't think it's a try thing. I don't think it's a try thing, Justin. I think it's everyone has to understand when it comes to an install of an offense or defense. When you're installing your offense or your defense, it's not a singular person, right? It's not just Nick. It's not just going to be Kellen Moore. It's a committee thing. It's a committee approach. And everyone was talking about the people who needed to be fired. And I get that this person was not going to be fired without Nick being fired because he's Nick's boy. Kevin Patullo was the passing game coordinator. Explain to me the role, guys. I've coached. I spent a lot of time coaching. Explain to me that role. Explain to me that role. I don't get it. I don't get it. Currently, what's that role? I don't understand it, man. If Kellen Moore's being brought in like this, like I just feel like between Brian Johnson, Kevin Patullo, and Nick Sirianni, and then of course you got to count in your run game coordinator, so Stoutland, Singleton, with the running backs coach. Like you bring all these guys together, they coordinate things. It wasn't right. That's I think where the downfall happened. That relationship wasn't right with those set of guys. Now you see this departure of guys leaving the coop. So I don't know how to feel about Kellen Moore, right? I know the install is going to be by committee. I know Kellen Moore is going to definitely, by the directive of the front office, get a certain say over things. But I also know that head coaches have certain things in the playbook that they want. I have worked for two in particular, really offensive-minded head coaches that the systems were purely their systems. I called the plays on game day. And I've worked with one defensive-minded where it was purely the stuff I learned throughout my time. It was my system. I don't know how that's going to shake out, guys. I don't like. There's a percentage to this stuff, and I don't know what that percentage looks like. Like I know it'll be greater than it was last year, right? But I don't know the totality of it. I do know that it felt like what someone said earlier, which is we really just kind of like tried to rehash out what we did last year, only bring in a couple of new ideas and then roll with that and then not account for the fact that defense has had an entire offseason to study what we did and to shut down that Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts offense. They had enough time to shut that down and we weren't ready for that. So like on that account, we'll see, guys. I'm just going to say we'll see. In season will give us the answers, right? Once we get in season and we can see what these guys have done, we'll have the answers. We'll visually be able to see if they're using, stack sets to free up receivers, right? To get free releases, right? If they're using more motion, right? Or are we still seeing these matchup-based things that are predicated upon spread concepts, right? The run-to-pass ratio stuff. Like, that'll all be answered in season. That's all I can really say, guys. I mean, if I was in the room, I would tell you everything. Well, not everything, because some things got to be kept from opponents, but I would give you the gist of the overall nature of things. But I'm not in that room, guys, so I don't know. I don't know what that nature of that relationship is going to look like. Thank you, Easy. Firing Brian, but keeping Kevin Patullo is pure nepotism. Thank you. Thank you. I'm not saying that Kevin Patullo had to be necessarily fired, but my man couldn't have been demoted. I don't understand how Aaron Moorhead had receivers not understanding where to be in terms of route progressions, having two guys in the same spot, creating a situation where we can't isolate on the player and get the ball out there in a playoff game, dudes running into each other, all the procedural calls we had at the wide receiver spot from being illegally down the field, and the offensive line's not his fault. I'm not counting offensive linemen. I'm talking about receivers blocking downfield before the ball. Like all these things, and Aaron Moorhead, who look, I said they should have kept Aaron Moorhead when they changed staffs. I thought we had too much going on at the wide receiver spot. Just give one guy a chance to see what happened. He's been here for a while now. I still see a lot of mistakes from the wide receiver. I don't see a lot of great coaching, personally. I don't know, guys. I don't feel that one either. I thought maybe Aaron Moorhead should have been allowed to seek other opportunities. Kevin Patullo put down into that wide receiver coach position. And then Kellen Moore is now your offensive coordinator. And then, you don't need to title this as your passing game coordinator, but he's coordinating the passing game. You just need a run game coordinator to go home with the offensive coordinator. That's what I thought should have happened. Akwar and Davis Price have some potential. I like those signings. I like where they're going with the show enough, right? These are just they're high reward, low risk. There's no harm if these guys don't work out, right? But I think if you do things right, when you get guys like Julian Akwar and you got Brandon Smith, right? Terrell Lewis, if you can hit on one or two of these guys and they become good rotational edge players, that's important. That's a really important role. I mean, I forgot Patrick Johnson in our conversation from earlier, but clearly you guys, Patrick Johnson would factor into this conversation as well. That was my bad. I should have definitely included him. I love Nick. Yeah. They were willing to fire Doug Peterson, who won the Super Bowl. It seems like the locker room was lost mid-season. Different circumstances, Dennis, for why he got fired. And Doug didn't really get fired. Doug really chose to leave, if we're going to get technical about it. Doug's was over not willing to have say over his personnel from the coaching side of things. He wanted more control over his coaching staff. He did not want to be forced into decisions. I agree with the front office's standpoint, but I also think a coach has got to be able to live or die by their decisions. So I disagree with what they did to Doug. I agree that they were right that Doug was making some mistakes there in the coaching world. Not quite the same situation as with Nick. He was bullying the coaches. It's Tori. I do know that the Eagles really wanted Kellen Moore the same summer that we hired Sirianni as head coach. That is true. I do remember those reports as well. Yeah. 5 years wasn't picked up. His fifth year wasn't picked up. They said, yeah, but I don't buy that, Justin. I think it's a BS report. I don't buy that Dom, the head of security, is not babysitting your head coach, guys. I don't buy that for a second. I think they're exaggerating reports to get engagement and views. I literally could not bear to watch the defense last year and had to change the channel when they came on at times. Has to be better. Yeah, guys, you got to keep in mind, though, they have to facilitate clicks to an organization that is heavily dependent upon eyeballs being on their product to warrant the brand deals, right? To have these things come in. When I say brand deals, it's really relationships in terms of brands, not like a brand deal, like we think of YouTubers, but to have sponsorship behind the programming. So I don't buy that report for 1 second. I think they're taking something that is, there's an element of truth behind it that Dom, is a guy that is trusted by the coaches, the players, the front office. He's got some weight to him. But to say that he's the figure holding Nick Sirianni back, that's bullcrap. That's straight BS, guys. Do not buy into that nonsense. That is not how coaching works, guys. That's straight BS. That is a report that has a small sliver of truth to it that is being greatly exaggerated to get eyes on it. That's all that is. I feel like Kellen Moore was a front office hire. Yeah, I don't know what his relationship is to Nick, guys. I like I said, I don't know. But, the front office had previous interest in him, obviously. And it made sense because things went downhill when Dom got suspended. No, it doesn't, Dennis. It doesn't make sense. I can downplay what you just said in an instant. I saw Nick get in Jalen's butt on a couple of occasions, including being caught on the camera. Nick has got into it with other coaches before. When Dom has been on that sideline, that is all nonsense, Dennis. It's all nonsense. Easy. I think the Kingsbury deal fell through because he wanted more control of the playbook. And coaches and Nick couldn't fire Kevin and Aaron, so he went with more. Possibly. I don't know. I don't know the workings behind the scenes easy. I can't say that. I trade Reddick and sign Allen. They will tag Allen. If it's one player I would like to see get going in this offense, it's Albert O. Is he under contract for 2024? Great question. Sure enough, I thought he was. Albert. All right, let me take a look at his contract, guys. Alrighty. 4-year, $4 million contract with Denver. So when is he due up again? Alrighty. No, he's an unrestricted free agent, guys. He's definitely unrestricted. Now, I don't remember if anything came down the pipeline, show enough, in terms of after he got traded here. Perhaps the Eagles reworked his deal or something. That's something that I'm missing, but I see nothing on Spotrac indicating that. So as far as I know, he's an unrestricted free agent right now. So, I mean, doesn't mean that he's gone, show enough. I mean, they might have liked what they saw behind the scenes and said, look, we're going to bring him back in here. We're going to try that one again. But they need an answer behind Dallas Goedert. And I do think Albert O has upside. He's been good in the league before. King Kenzo said, of course, it was a front office hire. They couldn't hire a hot dog vendor right now. Yeah. Unfortunately, he's a free agent. Yeah. Yeah, Reddick's consistency is too valuable to trade, in my opinion. He's had 5 defensive coordinators in the last 4 seasons and still had a minimum of 11 sacks in those 4 seasons. Yeah, I personally, I think it would be a big mistake to trade Haason Reddick myself. I don't think that you find impact players like this that often. I know some people were suggesting maybe if we couldn't get a first-round pick out of Washington, there's absolutely no way I'm trading Haason Reddick in division where I got to play this guy twice a year. And I also got Micah Parsons on the Cowboys. There's no way I'm doing that. Like, I'm not going to send somebody a premier pass rusher for that. Like, no, absolutely not. Like, there's no way. Now, I think they've got to get better in terms of the way they utilize guys. I think we're a little too stale and stagnant at times with the way we brought our blitzes. I think they're very easy to kind of block up China, especially if you go with a 6 or 7 man protection. You can block that up quite easily, right? If you go with a 7-man protection where you keep a tight end in, and then you have a running back as well, and it's a 7-man protection, and we're going all out, I just think that we were really easy to pick up on. And then with the back end not holding up because the pass rush isn't necessarily getting home quick enough, I just thought we got exposed a little bit when we went all out pressure. Now, I think if you use guys like Nolan Smith, Julian Aquara, Brandon Smith, Terrell Lewis, whoever may end up on this squad that has some of that natural pass rush ability. So now you got these guys who are a little bit more athletically gifted, Nolan Smith being the most among them, to mix in with Haason Reddick and a Josh Sweat and a Brandon Graham. I think if you start mixing and matching your personnel to where you got to account for, like, I don't know who's dropping and I don't know who's coming in terms of what's going on here. And now I got Jalen Carter. I got Milton Williams. I got these guys that can beat you one-on-one. That's what I would like to see, China. I want to see a little bit more innovative, things built into the system around obvious pass rush situations, right? I love the way that some of the teams were playing us early in the year to where they were bringing up 7, 8 on the line of scrimmage, right? And then at the snap of the ball, everyone drops and it's only a 3-man rush. But now we've adjusted to the pressure and those routes are not open, right? Even worse, we made mistakes earlier in the year where we turned the ball over against those kind of looks. I think we got to adapt like that because, those things help you out in terms of the run game. You're bringing people in the box. They help you out in terms of your coverage, right? Because now you can trap. You can play some trap. You can play some things to get the ball. You can palm on the outside, play a palm coverage. Or for your pressure packages, you can use the athleticism of guys, right? Reddick's a really athletically gifted guy. Josh Sweat's an athletically gifted guy. Nolan Smith's an athletically gifted guy. If we can get anything out of a Julian Aquara, Brandon Smith, a Terrell Lewis, if any of those dudes pan out to be like rotational pieces, right? Say we sign an Andrew Van Ginkel, from Miami. Any of those dudes, right? If any of those guys pan out for the Eagles, now you can start playing with those dominoes with Jalen Carter and these guys and getting those favorable looks. That's what I want to see happen personally. And I think Vic Fangio is definitely he's going to do a little bit more in this deceptive nature of disguising stuff. Reddick has also made the first NFC Championship game by taking Purdy out in the first quarter. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Reddick wants Bosa guaranteed. Garrett money, no thanks. He gets sacks, but not enough pressure like those guys. He's up there with Bosa, easy to be fair. And I think he's a better all-out pass rusher than Bosa. If I'm going to be, I think Bosa's a better all-around player, easy, but I definitely think Haason Reddick's a better actual edge rusher. If we're going to be fair about it. Now, I think you got a point to be easy. I think you have a point about what's the nature of the contract, what's the nature of the money, and how do you structure it. That those are important details that I don't have the information on. Would you trade Reddick to Denver if it meant you got Pat Surtain the second? Not if I didn't have a backup plan. I would not sacrifice my pass rush for coverage. We got to get better in coverage. I would not sacrifice my pass rush for coverage, though. I remember Reddick killing us for like 4 sacks and never in the division. Exactly. Like, I'm not trading that dude in division. Like, that would be a huge mistake. Now you got Parsons and Reddick. You're going to see those guys 4 times a year. No, thank you. No, thank you. That would be terrible. Allen going to be good or better than Reddick, and he's younger, plus Reddick disappeared the last 5 weeks. Pop, everyone in the entire defense kind of disappeared, man. I don't think that's a fair evaluation, to be honest. I think there was a lot of stuff going on internally. And I also think that it's a stretch to say Allen's going to come anywhere near Reddick. Reddick's got 4 consecutive seasons of 10-plus sacks, man. That's not commonly done. You're talking about one of the true apex pass rushers in the league. I think Allen's got a ways to go before he enters that discussion, man, personally. Yeah. China said he deserves big money and he wants to be in Philly. I believe Howie can make something shake. Yeah, and also I don't necessarily buy into when someone says like, oh, well, not against Easy. Easy's just, like, he's been on this channel for a long time. Like, he's a smart guy. He's going off of what reports are saying. But I don't always buy the reports when they say, like, this guy wants Bosa money. Like, what edge rusher doesn't? You know what I mean? Like, you always are going to you're always going to go into a negotiation high. So he can say that he wants Bosa money, and that's the starting point. But, the reality is that it's probably going to come back down to a more respectable number, somewhere in between. And I do think he's, like I said, I think he's a better natural pass rusher than Bosa. I just think Bosa is just a better overall player. Pop said, and if we got to pay an edge $25 million a year, I'd want to pay the younger person who fits the scheme better. You don't think Haason Reddick fits a Vic Fangio scheme? I kind of disagree with you there, man. I think he's a really good fit for Fangio's scheme. I think he's the closest thing you're going to get to Von Miller. He's a perfect fit in my opinion. What's good, Steve? How you been, man? Hanging in there, Market. How about you, buddy? Reddick's numbers are right up there with the best of them, including going against the run. I don't think Reddick is trying to get that much money, but if you start high, you can work your way down to the number. Exactly, Shona. That's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, where's he supposed to start the negotiations? Like, he's equaled the production of all those guys. Like, of course he's going to start high. Like I said, Shona, I think Bosa's a better overall player, but I think Reddick's the better natural pass rusher. You know what I mean? Like, you always start high and then work your way back down. And Reddick would make us pay for trading him. Exactly. I don't want this dude going in division twice a year, and he's got external motivation because we gave up on him when we traded him. Like, that dude is. Some of you guys you're going a little overboard on Reddick, my guy. You're forgetting this is one of the best 5 or 6 guys in the league at chasing the quarterback. And I'm sorry, but Allen doesn't deserve to be in the same conversation as Reddick right now. He's got much to prove to be brought in that conversation. That's old school bargaining. Yeah, exactly. We will be getting edge help in the draft or free agency. I mean, that's a cosmic fear, Ashford. Sorry, man. It's like really small on the screen. So that's the challenge, right? Is if you look at what we've done in terms of the defensive line in the first year. So over the last 2 years, we've taken 3 players on the line, right? So Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, right? So I'm not saying that it's untenable. It can't be done. It won't be done. I'm not saying any of those things, Cosmic Fear. What I am saying is that we would be saying for 3 consecutive drafts, we would be spending a first-round pick on a defensive lineman if you count Nolan Smith in that regards, right? And that's 4 players in 3 years. Like, I don't know. Like, There are some reasons to doubt that they would do that, but there's still reasons to suspect that they might still draft an edge player high, I think that they had interesting guys like Ojulari and a lot of guys in last year's draft class. I think they had a lot of interest in a lot of those dudes. And I think if they had been there in their second round picks, they might have taken one of those guys. Unfortunately, a lot of those dudes really climbed. And to be fair, they climbed in the media. The scouts kind of have a feel for what's going on. But the media, you started seeing a lot of those names climb a lot higher as we got closer to the draft. So, the perception was they just clearly weren't going to be there towards the middle or back end of the second round. So we lost out on a lot of guys, I think, in that role. And we took Nolan Smith late in that first round. Reddick fits Fangio's scheme exactly. Exactly. I don't understand what that comment was saying. Like I'm going to have to disagree with that person tremendously. Reddick is a perfect fit for the scheme. What would be the biggest move we can make that would automatically help our defense out day one? I think adding Patrick Queen. I like your train of thought, which is get us a bona fide off-ball stacked linebacker. Somebody you can't just roll out there with Nakobe Dean and a patchwork of guys again. That cannot be the solution. Market, I say that, but you know what I'm saying, right? You're like, come on, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, of course, Eagles can do whatever they want to do, but I hope deep down in my gut, that is not going to be their solution, that they have learned something. And I think EZ brought this point up earlier that, if you look at Fangio in the past, Fangio has put a lot more detail and a lot more effort into stacked off-ball linebackers than we've seen in previous regimes here in Philly. So, we might see a little changing of the guard there. I hope there's a little bit more attention spent there personally too. I don't know how much money they're willing to give to that position. That's going to be one of those things to where, do we see a changing of the guard because Fangio's here? Do we see that mindset change about giving a guy a decent contract, right? I mean, if you think about when we had, I almost said Jim Johnson, not Jim Johnson, the other Johnson. When we signed Nigel Bradham was that type of what I'm saying? Like, Patrick Queen is better than what Nigel Bradham was in his prime, in my opinion. But Nigel Bradham wasn't like a no-namer, right? He was a good, solid middle, it's like middle of the pack type linebacker that ended up having more upside than we anticipated when we got him here. We need another move like that, right? We draft a couple of young guys, and then you go get that Nigel Bradham type dude to be in here, right? We had Kendricks that year. We had Hicks that year, and then we ended up signing, those two guys were draftable assets we had on the roster, and then we ended up signing Nigel Bradham. I hope we see something similar to that. Opop said his pass coverage is why I said that Allen is a better pass defender. You're talking about less than 1% of snaps, though, Opop. I mean, they're not going to make that decision. You're not going to sacrifice someone who's not just a better pass rusher, but a tremendously better pass rusher for something that's going to count for maybe 10 to 15 snaps total on a season. And I think with Haason Reddick, I mean, I think that's just a fan narrative that gets taken out of context. It gets taken out of hand, and it's not truthful, to be honest. I think with Nigel Bradham, I'm going to go look it up for you real quick, and I'll tell you exactly how many times he actually dropped out into coverage. Like, I'm pretty confident it was not that he did not drop into coverage that often. So let me go by position. Let me go down here to coverage, and then I'm just going to look at edge players. I'm going to see if he just pulls up underneath edge. I might have to put linebacker depending on how they classify them. So Haason, let me see. Give me 1 second, guys, because the Eagles do not drop their guys that often. So Josh Sweat dropped a total of 24 times on the season. Okay? That was Josh Sweat. Brandon Graham dropped a total of 22 times. Okay? That was Brandon Graham. So 24 and 22 so far. I'm going down, guys. Give me 1 second, guys. I don't want to overlook somebody. David Ajobo. Let me keep going. Where are you at? This guy's way down there. Patrick Johnson dropped a total of 3 times. Be fair to Patrick Johnson, he didn't play that much last year. So that's not, I wouldn't really use that as an example per se. I saw his name as I was dropping down. Haason Reddick dropped a total of 48 times in total. So 48 times out of his 635 snaps, guys. So 48 out of 635 snaps. Like, he didn't drop as much as people think, man. Which, yeah, like it's not going to be his role, OPOP. That's not going to be his role. Like, you're talking about something that's very rarely done. I don't think that they would use that in terms of that. And I can look, just to give you some clarity on it. OPOP, I'll give you the clarity in terms of like the Miami players. So let me organize this by teams, and I'll look at Miami's edge defenders, and I'll tell you who was dropping for them and how often it was happening. Okay, NM. Go back. Miami should be all the way up to the top. Okay, so Jalen Phillips dropped a total of 32 times. Malik Reed dropped a total of 21 times. Bradley Chubb dropped a total of 57 times. Cameron Good dropped a total of 11 times. And then Andrew Van Ginkel, who played a hybrid role between being an off-ball stack linebacker and an on-ball linebacker, dropped 147 times. And then they had Ugba drop 6 times, Melvin Ingram 8 times, Bruce Irvin 5 times, Justin Houston 19 times. So unless they're going to bring a guy like Van Ginkel, could play off-ball or on-ball. They could use him either way. He has that flexibility. But unless you're going to have a guy like that plays that type of role, OPOP, you wouldn't do that just based upon that, man. It's not a strong enough part of your playbook in terms of the way schematically you play your edges. Okay, can you give your knowledge on the wide receivers we signed on future contracts? Jacob Harris, Athletic Freak, Austin Watkins, and Shaquan Davis and Griffin Herbert. Some of those I need to look at. Davis and Herbert, I don't know that much about them. Austin Watkins intrigues me, Sean. Austin Watkins has major speed. Jacob Harris is a little bit more twitchy in terms of the two. But Austin Watkins has elite type speed. But yeah, he's a guy, Sean, I'd like to see. I'd like to see in camp what he does. He's the one I got my eye on. But I will take a closer look for you guys at Jacob. Let me write them down. That's a great request, man. So let me write down. Let's take a look at Jacob Harris, Austin Watkins, because these will make really good summer videos, guys, when we're trying to evaluate the roster and kind of what's going on. There's that dead period. You guys know what I'm talking about, man, where you better have some pre-planned content, or it's going to be really hard to make content because there'll just be no news. We'll definitely we'll get a video analyzing these guys and talking about who may or may not actually have an outside shot at making it. I like Austin Watkins. I like definitely what I saw from him in preseason. I think he's got more speed than he's given credit for. I got to hope Fangio wouldn't agree to come here without the assurance of getting linebacker help. Yeah, I think that would be tough if we're just coming in here with Nakobe Dean under contract and a bunch of question marks. That's a tough sell, I think, for any D coordinator. Teams may run a 34 base, don't really use their on-ball linebackers to cover. Yeah, exactly. You're talking about a very minimum amount of snaps. Maybe in the flats, but that's nothing really. I don't care about the pass when it concerns an edge player. Yeah, exactly. Move Dean to Will. See, that's easy. I agree with you there. I would move Dean to Will and try to find a natural Mike. Move Dean to Will like he did in college and get a true Mike. Yeah, I'm with you, Easy. 100% on that one. 100%. He's not just an edge player. May not be OPOP, but my point is that you're not going to sacrifice your pass rush for that. You're not going to sacrifice a player of Haason Reddick's caliber if you can come to – now, mind you, we don't know ultimately what will happen with Haason Reddick. I'm not stating Haason Reddick will be here. I don't know. But if contractually you can figure it out with you and Haason Reddick, that dude's got 3 to 4 more years of real production left in him. I would not jump the ship on a guy who's a true apex pass rusher. That would be a huge mistake in my opinion. Especially for an in-between guy. When you got guys on the market, like Andrew Van Ginkel is a dude who's on the market who can play off ball and can play on ball. So he can play as an edge or he can play off ball as a stack linebacker. He can do either of those things, right? You saw he had 147 coverage snaps. He also was, accounted for in their pass rush. You can find guys where you don't have to necessarily get rid of a dude who's an incredible pass rusher for that role. Like I wouldn't, like to me, the way that Haason Reddick gets moved out of Philly is kind of going here to Cosmic's point. I think I only saw Nolan Smith's name, Cosmic. I didn't really read your thing yet, but as if Nolan Smith starts to grow. Nolan Smith is that guy that could potentially grow there, right? Or if you see a changing of the guard in Fangio. We talked about Julian Akwar. We talked about Brandon Smith. We talked about Terrell Lewis. Those are bigger, rangier edge players, right? 6'3", 245, 250-ish those guys are, with over pretty much those guys are 34 inches or more in the arm reach. I think Terrell Lewis is like 33.88, but I'm just going to round that up, guys. They're all around 34 inches in the arm reach and like 80-inch plus wingspan. So that is a different body frame. So unless there's a changing of a guard like that, those are the things that would indicate to me, not like bringing outside presences in from free agency per se. I don't think you're going to get an apex pass rusher like that. Like those dudes we were very fortunate when that happened to Haason Reddick. That happened to Haason Reddick because remember, Arizona had no clue how to use Haason Reddick, and they figured it out too late in his career. And then when he came up for contract, he wasn't willing to work with Arizona because they basically wasted his first few years. So then he got to Carolina, was really productive in Carolina, but they had Brian Burns, and they wanted to figure things out with Brian Burns, so they let Haason walk. That's so rare. Oh, Pop, it's so rare for edge players, man. You just don't find these guys like that very often. Like, the only other example I can think of, like, off the top of my head is, like, Jason Babin. We signed him, but he didn't last here that long. And I think Trent Cole, was it Trent Cole that came to? No, Trent Cole was a 5th-round pick of the Eagles. Dang it. Guys, who was it? Early 2000s under Jim Johnson? Hugh Douglas. So Jason Babin, Hugh Douglas, and Trent Cole, sorry, let me say this again, guys. Hugh Douglas, Jason Babin, and Haason Reddick are the three guys. Javon Curse, but he wasn't in Philly that long. And, he had one really good season in 2004, then he kind of fell off. But those are the only guys I can really think of where we went out there and got them, and there was some like real success that these are like these apex pass rushers, and they probably weren't even thought of that when they hit the market. I don't know that Hugh Douglas was thought of that way. Jason Babin, I think people knew he could be that kind of player, so I do think you can make that case for Jason Babin, but those dudes are pretty rare. They're pretty rare on the market in their prime. As they get older, sure. Not in their prime, though. Those are really rare to find. I want this defense to give Nolan Smith a chance to prove himself. Don't care if they use him as an edge or a linebacker. I just like to see them be creative. He's the outside linebacker, so pass coverage is important, and y'all cried all year every time he dropped into coverage. It's not, Pop. Dude, I'm showing you the actual numbers. He played 675 freaking snaps. Only 48 of them were dropped into coverage. You're going to sacrifice over 600 other snaps where he's either defending the run or an actual pass rusher? Like, come on, man. For 48 snaps? No. Hard no. Hard no. That would be a terrible decision. We need our edge players to get home. Nothing more, really. Exactly. You're thinking of an off-ball linebacker, which would really be in a 43 or 4-2, the nickel, 4-2-5, the nickel base of it. Not a 34 on-ball linebacker. The duties are different. Exactly. He's thinking of a Sam in a 43, a traditional 43, where they actually cover and carry with the tight ends. I agree with that. I remember when we got him, I think, from the Bills, and he worked great. I just think that he's just so intelligent as a player, and he will make everybody else's job easier. Sorry, guys, it's jumping on the chat a little bit. Should we resign Swift? I think and hope so. I think he'd be even better in this new offense. It's going to come down to the contract, Sean. I'm not like opposed to signing Swift, but it's contract. Contract matters in that stuff. And if he ain't did it as long as Reddick, but 17.5 sacks ain't a scrub. I'm not saying he's a scrub, man. I'm saying that I'm not going and chasing it. And by the way, like any true impact pass rusher of Haason Reddick's level, when you're talking about the Nick Bosa's, when you're talking about the Michael Parsons, the Haason Reddicks, when you're talking about these type of players, they're not coming cheap, by the way, Pop. So if your concern is over the money, they're not coming cheap, man. They're just not. Like, it's going to cost you. Like those dudes are going to cost money, man. They're going to cost you a crap ton of money. They're not going to come cheap. It is what it is, man. Like, and even Josh Allen, he's not as young as you think, man. Josh Allen will be 27 come season's time. I mean, you would be signing him right around the same exact time frame that you signed, Haason Reddick. Like, I'm not saying Josh Allen's a bad player, but it's going to cost you. That's not cheap. And 1 year production is not enough for me to jump off the deep end on something. When I got a guy showing me 4 years of consistency and showing me he can play at that level, you know what I mean? I don't know. Any interest in bringing back the Green Goblin, Jalen Mills? It depends on how they feel about adding a veteran presence to the secondary. It's hard to say. I don't know what that's going to be a Vic Fangio thing. You know what I mean? Like, I think Green Goblin had a fairly good relationship with the front office, but I don't know what his relationship was with Fangio. Is that a crazy trade? Sweat, Bradbury, and a first for Surtain, or is more needed? Because they would have to eat. So Bradbury's contract is very favorable for the team that is receiving him. We have to eat a lot of dead money on it, though. I don't know if I would give you, mind you, Sweat is a little up and down his production as a pass rusher, right? So you can't really call Sweat he's an elite talent. He's not an elite production guy. That's a tough one, man, because it's a first. It's Sweat, who is a really good edge rusher. He's not in that category of elite guys. Bradbury, I mean, for them, not a lot of concern on it, but for the Eagles, you have to eat that. So now you got to replace more pieces on the edge. You got rid of something that you probably need to figure out in terms of your corner situation, but then you also you're getting rid of a premium pick. On top of that, I don't know, man. I mean, I don't necessarily think, Lena, that's necessarily like outside the range of, I don't know what the value would be. I can't tell you that, Lena, because when you involve players, it's complex in terms of how they equate the draft value. I don't know. And that can differ from organization to organization, depending on the scheme they run, depending on the grades their own front offices had on Sweat. But you got to look at it this way. Bradbury's over 30. Sweat has a degenerative knee issue. You know what I mean? Like, and you're adding a first there. I don't know. I don't know how they would view it. That's tough to say. I can only give you the insight of, like, you know what I mean? Like, Sweat does have a degenerative knee issue, but he is a very good player. Bradbury is above 30 years old now, kind of fell off last year, but just 1 year removed from being an all-pro. And at first, like, it's tough. You are replacing one need, Bradbury, for Surtain in a first. So, I mean, like, you can kind of look at it like those Bradbury in the first for Surtain kind of, it solves that initial problem. But then you're going to have to figure out a lot of stuff in terms of your pass rush on the back end. Like, if you're talking about hurries and pressures and things like that, just things that equate just outside of sacks, Sweat is very good. If you look at the time to pass rush, he's normally leads the Eagles normally. He's normally pretty high in the league. I don't know. I don't think you're out there playing in left field per se. Like, I don't think you're out there in the theory, but it would create some issues. They would have to definitely have some subsequent plans in terms of the pass rush there. Let's not forget Gannon ran a loosely based Fangio system, and Reddick was a 16.5 sack guy with 4 to 5 forced fumbles. We've had 20. If Gannon used him right in the beginning of the season, would have beat Bosa easily. Yeah. Hugh Douglas was elite with the Jets, and then with us, he was the man. Yeah, Hugh was good. He was a good player. Wasn't Hugh the guy who got into it with T.O., by the way, Antonio? Weren't they the ones that exchanged blows in the locker room? Gate, would you resign Reddick, Swift, Smith, Kelsey, and Dickerson? I got to know Kelsey's commitment. And at some point, we got to pull that Band-Aid off. If Kelsey wants to come back, I'm probably going to find a way of getting Kelsey back, honestly. But I need to know that he's committed to this season. I'm not 100% sold that Kelsey's coming back, guys. I'm not. I want him back. I'm not sold that that's happening. At some point, the Band-Aid's got to come off. Juergens has got to be your center. You got to get Steen in there at right guard and figure out if that's your solution. You know, that's what we drafted this stuff for. That's the way it's supposed to, that's what we were thinking. Dickerson's got to get an extension, Roji. He's a good player. That's a guy you got to extend. I think Reddick, I would be in favor of extending. but I don't think it's a necessity. I just wouldn't make a foolish move like trading that guy in division. I wouldn't make a foolish move like sacrificing our pass rush to make some kind of weird point. Like, you know what I mean? Just you got to be smart about it. Doesn't mean that everything is reconcilable, but I mean, Reddick, if things are open to it, I would sign it back. Swift, tell me, it depends on the money. I think we all know Dickerson and Smith have got to get signed. Smith is entirely too good to let walk out of Philadelphia. Dickerson is going to be a staple of the offensive line. Those two guys are definite. Reddick is a guy that has definitely been underpaid for his services in Philly. However, there's still, contractually, there's things that have to be done. Swift is that name I don't know. Roji, I don't know. Swift is. So I'm trying to look this up, guys. Let me see. Give me 1 second, guys. So Haason was born when? When is his birthday? Hang on, I got to get to a site where it actually shows his birthday because then it's not really worthy of anything. So September. So he'll be 30 come season start. Allen will be 27, which is around the age that we signed Haason Reddick. I think the mistake here is thinking that a guy is over the hill at 30 years old in terms of playing in the defensive line. I still think this young man has 3 years. Now, if you're asking me how do you structure the contract, I don't know. And $25 million, I have to agree with Shonuff, is a starting price, not the real one. It's just business. And the dude is worth money, man. He's worth some money. And you also got to understand that the total salaries and the average annual value of the salaries are not indicative of what the player will actually get paid. Contract structure matters. That's the part we don't know. Nolan got blacked by wide receivers and has no pass rush moves. Surprisingly, he was good against the run. No, it wasn't surprisingly if you watched this film, Easy. He was really good against the run at Georgia. That was the thing that stood out to me about him. Are you worried about his future? Not really, Easy. I think that he showed you that he's an opportunistic when it comes to the pass rush. His speed is something to be dealt with. He's really good. He's got elite level athleticism. I do think that your earlier point is valid, that he needs to refine a pass rush move to ever be on Haason Reddick level. I think that is fair, Easy. I think that is a very fair assessment to say that Haason Reddick wasn't Haason Reddick year one. And it took some time for Haason Reddick to develop into what he is. And with Nolan Smith, you're kind of dealing with a guy that has a lot of athleticism, but he's got to learn a lot about technique. He's got guys in the house that can teach him now. Josh Sweat is a guy that's been in the league now for a while. Reddick's been in the league. He's a guy that's been around. Brandon Graham. He's got those guys in house to help him a little bit, right? I don't know, Easy. Like there's some things behind the scenes you have to know about these players that I just don't have intel on. So I don't have intel on like who Nolan Smith is working with in the offseason. That stuff matters more than people realize. Who you surround yourself with, the camps you're involved in, right? A lot of these guys go to each other's camps too. That's the information we need, Easy. We need that information about Nolan Smith. What camp is he being involved in? Who's his private coach? You know what I mean? We know in-house the structure's there. What's Clint Hurt going to do with this guy? Clint Hurt's another oddball, right? Clint Hurt looking like he can still play on the D-line. What's he doing? To me, Swift will be the cheapest option for a good young back. I would give Swift like 21 mil for 3 or 4 years. Pretty close to what wouldn't that be fairly close to? It might be a little under, but wouldn't that be pretty close to what Miles Sanders got with Carolina? Is right around that area, wasn't it? Yeah, the only reason I added Sweat was I don't get how we would fit a 34 scheme. He's been in it. I mean, we've been running it's called an unbalanced line, but I mean, it's a hybrid 34-43 front that they run between that 30 into the 50 fronts. It's a hybrid between a 30 and a 40 front. So he's been playing in that. He fits perfectly fine. He's athletic. You got to remember, Haason Reddick was an outside linebacker at Miami. He's got the underlying movement skills. That young man is one of the most gifted athletes on the team. Just to be straightforward on what his testing looked like, Lana, He came in at 6'4", 250 at the combine with 34.63 inch arm reach, almost 35 inch in the arm reach, and an 84 inch wingspan. The only other player I can think of off the top of my head that has that kind of crazy measurables to them is the young man from the Vikings. His name's slipping my mind right now, guys. Danielle Hunter. Danielle Hunter has those crazy kind of measurables and underlying testing numbers I'm about to tell you. He put up a 4.53 40 with a 1.55 10 split. Whew, that 10 split is serious. A 2.61 20 split, a 39.5 inch vertical, almost 40 inches, a 6.953 cone. That's cornerback and wide receiver territory, and a 4.28 20. Young man has very fluid hips, can jump out of the freaking gym, and he's fast. His first few steps are incredibly fast for Josh Sweat. In addition, he has the length and the range of a guy you just don't see. The reason Josh Sweat lasted to the 4th round is because he had the degenerative knee issue, and teams disagreed on the medicals. A lot of teams did not think he'd ever make it to a second contract, and he did. So, I mean, he's gifted. He can definitely stand up as an overhang. He can put his hands in the dirt and rush you. He can fit pretty much any scheme. The only thing I don't think he'd be a natural for is I don't know if I'd use him at a high rep range to be like in a true 30 as a 5 technique or a 4-eye in an eagle front where they're one gap. I wouldn't use him in that necessarily, but I mean, he can fit as an edge player in those. He can definitely stand up and rush. Bradbury got cut by the Giants. He's always been a system player. Easy. I think you're right there. I definitely think he fits a system, and it's a zone system to where that reach and that link that he plays with can be used to disrupt things. Shonoff said, yeah, Nolan has the athleticism, but he needs to work on his technique. He struggles to shed the blocks, and he pretty takes offensive tackles with him. Got to get off the blocks. Yeah, pretty much takes offensive tackles with him. Yeah, he's not the most so I want to say this, Shonoff, and I want to provide context because I know that this could be misinterpreted if I say this the wrong way about him. He's not – so if you look at edge defenders, right, you're looking at guys normally that you want to be 33 inches in the arm reach or greater, right? It's normally the line of demarcation. Offensive line, normally about 33.5 inches is where they normally look. There's always outliers, guys. Don't just think because I say that means there's not outliers. There's clearly always outliers. He's 6'2", 238 by the combine. He had a 32.63 inch arm reach and an 81 inch wingspan. He's actually a little bit more rangier than you would think, but he's not completely to that level to where I think he's engaging and shedding easy. I think you're right in terms of where you're talking about stacking and shedding a block. If you had him out at linebacker, and I'm not saying you move him full-time to off-ball linebacker. I think he has the movement abilities to do it, but, that's not what I'm insinuating in this necessarily the statement. I'm just saying if he was playing outside linebacker, you look at this and say, man, this is the prototype. As an edge defender, he's very much in that hybrid, Von Miller, Haason Reddick type, those type of guys, right? Bruce Irvin, these weird hybrid type players, right? He's very much in that role of it. I mean, for his size, he's a little bit more rangier than you would think. But I do think against bigger, stronger guys, sometimes you see that it doesn't always stack up the way that a Josh Sweat and those guys can. You can make the argument that Brandon Graham's got short arms too, but Brandon Graham has this weird grown man strength. He's just pure strength, right? You don't see that ability to stack and shed guys the same way you'll see a Josh Sweat setting the edge. Yeah, Nolan needs a go-to pass rush move. Would you give Covey? In my opinion, Carter has all the technique to teach, although he plays in the interior, but the skills are transferable. I think he's going to have a major season, sure enough. I think he's going to have that Javon Hargrave interior pass rush season. I think that young man's going to be over 7 sacks this upcoming year. I think he's going to be the guy that is going to be a big, big part of that pass rush this upcoming year. Yeah, a lot of people are sleeping on Jalen Carter. I think he's going to be a true impact player. I want to go ahead and go full head steam and say he's going to have double digit, but anything above 7 sacks at the interior defensive line is a serious pass rush. That's. I think he's going to be that guy this year. Would you give Covey a legit shot at slot? Can he do it? I mean, I wouldn't make that my only option there, Sean, but I mean, sure. I mean, I'd give him a look in camp, see what he can do. I thought he showed a little bit at times, but, depending on where you are on stuff. Not only is Nolan a rookie, but he got very limited playing time, and the whole defense stunk. Can't come to conclusions about him yet. I'm excited for him next season. Signed in late, but in my opinion, Reddick does not fit a 34 scheme. He's not big enough to be a 34 defensive end. He's not athletic enough to be a 34 outside linebacker. Trade him for a 2 and a 4 or let him play out his contract. I mean, Bob, to each their own. I'm not doing that. I'm not giving up on one of the best pass rushers in the league. And I disagree with him not fitting as an outside linebacker in terms of a on-ball stacked Sam. I mean, Von Miller has played in Vic Fangio's scheme. Bruce Irvin was just used in Fangio's scheme. Like, he fits. Like, I'm going to disagree with you there. Reddick wouldn't play defensive end in a 34 left lateral who'd be at his natural position on ball outside linebacker. Exactly. I think people are confusing rush end for defensive end and what that means. On ball means you're standing up as an overhang, guys. And we've seen Von Miller do it. We've seen Bruce Irvin do it. We've seen a lot of guys do that. Like, no. Because if you're saying that, then you're also saying that the entire strategy that they've been trying to incorporate against Vic Fangio has been wrong from the scouting department, because Nolan Smith is that guy too. I mean, Nolan Smith is very much similar in stature and frame. Carter season depends on the staff scheming him one-on-one. He was doubled pretty much every time he played. Yeah, easy. I agree with that statement that they've got to find a way of creating those unique one-on-ones. You got to definitely be there, but I think it's easier said than done, because I think teams are always going to pay attention to Carter. But I think you need to commit. I think you need to make teams commit to a one-on-one blocking scheme if you can, right? I mean, make them commit and make them get off of Carter so that way he can truly take over a game on you. Or the other side of this is if they're going to double to Carter, these other guys have got to win those one-on-one matchups. Milton Williams is a better player than he showed us last year, but he's got to put it on film in a prominent role like that. So, I mean, we've seen him be very effective as a, kind of like that rotational piece. But if he's going to be that main guy, he's got to show that a little bit more. And when you get those opportunities, you got to make teams pay for it. If they're going to double Carter like that, you got to be there. Carter truly hit the rookie wall last year. Coaching certainly didn't help either. Coaching to an extent to where they didn't scheme it right. I don't think he hit a rookie wall as much as it is that teams reacted to him. They started putting double teams on him. I mean, that man never really saw a one-on-one block in the second half of the season. They weren't about to let him start taking over those games. I would certainly love Milton at a 34 end. That would be nasty, I think. Yeah, as a traditional down lineman where he's going to play like a 4-eye or 5 technique, Milton Williams is a prototype for that. Yes, that's exactly where you would play him. And they do play him sometimes like that. Yeah, I think scheme on and off ball confuses people that haven't played maybe. Yeah. I think they're thinking that he's like a 43 off ball stacked linebacker playing the Sam, where those guys have coverage responsibilities to pick up slot receivers if need be, depending on the coverage scheme. Definitely to pick up tight ends down the field. Like, that's not an on-ball, an on-ball overhang inside of a 34 is a completely different role. It's an edge rush. There's this misnomer that Rodgers is a slot cornerback. He actually played by far the most of his snaps on the outside. Sean, yeah, we already talked about that, but I will caution you to be careful with that thought process, okay? Because I'll tell you this. Until Avonte Maddox got to Philadelphia, where did he play? At Pittsburgh. Outside as a corner. He was not a nickel corner in Pittsburgh. And then he got to Philly. Philly diagnosed that he had all the underlying athletic traits to be successful in the nickel, and they put him there. And they bet right on Avonte Maddox being really good as a nickel cornerback. So I do think that Isaiah Rodgers, they have a decision to make. He's primarily played as a backup field corner. So think of Darius Slay's role. But most of those guys that play the field side, because it does take a certain fluidity in the hips to play that much space, those guys also have the underlying traits to be pretty successful in the slot. Now, there's a skill set to working through traffic. And that we don't know until we see him on the field, Sean. He's got to show he can work through the traffic there. But the underlying athleticism, he's got it. He could do it. Reddick, Sweat, Cox, etc. couldn't win their one-on-ones anymore, so teams doubled down on targeting Carter. Yeah, all these guys got to take advantage of it. I mean, if you're going to get those one-on-one blocks because they're doubling Carter, then you got to force teams out of that, right? And that is a big problem, easy to where the talent is here in the pass rush room. We've got guys that can get it done. There needs to be more creativity, and dudes do need to win. You've got a point. Like, guys have got to win those matchups and get home for sacks. Now, we got a lot of pressures off of stuff. You got to get home for the sacks. I mean, the one thing I think I would critique Haason Reddick on is that he missed 3 or 4 sacks this year by not being able to bring the quarterback down. He got there. He just could not wrap up and make the play. And that has to change, because that allowed a lot of quarterbacks to then slip and roll the pocket and extend plays. And we got burnt by Dak this year doing that. The young man that played for Washington, he got us in both games like that, to where we had a hard time containing. And those guys were just basically rolling the pocket and extending plays. And that was a big time concern there. Nolan Smith, Brandon Smith, Lewis, Aquara, maybe BG plus a VFA and maybe a pick. Rodgers is outside. Gatewood or Devontae Smith's athletic skill set, numbers, 40, etc. How fast is he? Reminds me a lot of Mike Quick, smooth, deceptive, fast guy. He measured in, like, he has a lot more height than you would think in terms of like his, I think he was almost an 80-inch wingspan guy. So, I mean, even though he's like 165, 170 pound guy, he's got a little bit more range to him than what you would think. Like, he's deceptive in that way. And that's why he's really effective sitting down in zones and just plucking the football out of the air. Also why he's pretty good on a one-on-one down the field, just elevating over guys and getting the football. But his actual numbers is the way it measured out. Mind you, this was only pro day stuff. He came in at 6 foot and a quarter, 170 pounds, 131-inch broad jump. So that's a pretty good broad jump. And 31.88-inch wingspan and a 78, I think it was like a half inch. 31.88-inch arm length and a 78+ inch wingspan. I don't think that he ran any of the testing data. Let me see if I can't find anything. Yeah, I don't think he ran the 40 or anything. Let me take a look if they put him. I got Inside the Eagles ran an article on him. Let me see if they dug anything up on his 40 time, because I don't see anything listed on the on any of the stats. But he could have had either a pro day, or he could have ran his own, like, his own professional day. Increase the number of NFL prospects decided he would allow his game to speak for itself. As one of the most productive players at the highest level of college football, Smith was right to bet on himself in that way. He didn't need to risk injury to put himself through a battery of tests in order to. His stock was already blue chip. That said, he did say he could beat. Okay, so he didn't run it, guys. He didn't run it, but he said he could beat Henry Ruggs' 4.27. I don't think he was beating Henry Ruggs 40 time personally, but I do think that he's a sub 4.45 guy. So he's going to run better than a 4.45. Whether that's a 4.3, 4.41, I don't know, but he didn't actually run, Sean. So it's hard to say. Judging by how much success Hargrave had with Gannon, sky's the limit with Carter and Fangio. Christian Wilkins incoming. I would take it. That's a good player, man. Got to play better and tighter in the secondary. That would help the D-line out a lot, especially with the talent we have there. Yeah, I agree, sure enough, that part of the issue is that the coverage has to match. It has to mesh with the pass rush. If your pass rush and coverage are out of sync with one another, I don't care who you got out there. It's not going to be good. One thing I believe Moore brings to the offense is getting guys in open field, allowing them to get yak. Both our starting wide receivers and Goddard have yak ability. I got a 4.54 that can't be right. No, he didn't run. So he didn't actually run. He said he could beat Henry Ruggs' 4.27. That was the quote he gave, but I ain't buying that. I'm not personally buying that, guys. I mean, it is what it is. I highly doubt that personally. I think he would have been a sub 4.45 guy. So I think he would have definitely ran under a 4.45. Now, whether that had been in the 4.3s or the early 4.4s, I don't know. But I definitely think he's fast. but he's a bit of a long strider. He's got kind of a long, lanky body. So, sprinting versus that kind of, you know what I mean? Like there's a little different there. There's a little difference there. So I don't know if he would have ran quite that 4.27 mark. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all. It's been 2 hours and 45 minutes. I got to jump off here. I got some things to do, but I appreciate y'all rocking out with me for almost 3 hours on this live stream, y'all. All right, y'all. Peace. I'll see you guys. I'll try to put out a video this weekend. We'll break down either some free agent stuff or I'll talk about the cap. I think we probably need to get to the cap, and that'll give us a segue into the free agency stuff. But all right, guys, appreciate y'all.